Welcome back. Is it on? Welcome back from lunch. We're going to continue to stay on a schedule here, so we're going to start as people trickle in. We have Stan Fung, who you've heard from a few times this week, but we're fortunate he commutes between the United States and China and is a real expert on what's happening with China, blockchain, and ICOs, and he's going to give you a half-hour talk on some of his insights. And then we'll continue with our afternoon program. The expo hall does close at 4 p.m. today, so if there's any reason you still want to talk to an exhibitor, do so by 4. After that, you can network in here or in the hallway. See you then. Also, we did not have enough interest to do the Napa Valley trip because we need a certain number, so we're not going to do it.
I know, I was like, yeah.
The remote.
Yeah, push it, just push it.
Green, go. Here we go. All right, I'll get started because I've got half an hour. I want to just finish it on time so the next speakers can join. My name is Stan Fung. It's my third time here, so I'm almost like old movies. Hopefully, after lunch, you're going to be awake. I was going to do a survey of the audience, but I think I'll do it later. Just not enough crowds. So I'm going to talk about global startups in the age of blockchain economy. And so I mentioned the term a few times earlier. What is global startups? Let me backtrack a little bit. When I first joined the venture business with Advent International back in the 1990s, I work in the Far East group in Boston. So our job is to invest in US firms and then bring it to China and Asia and then build a relationship. We call it cross-border technology transfer. And that was 27 years ago. So when you talk about tech transfer, it's really an old concept. It's evolved a lot in the last 25 years. Tech transfer is really not a right thing to say. So if you go to a conference and say tech transfer, don't go because it's really too late for that idea. So what is a global startup? Hopefully you can see that. So there's a way to define it. So global startup are really companies that are founded by entrepreneurs like yourself who want to build a global business. And the business will have operations that span across the world, and it has customers that span across the world. And most importantly, in this day and age, the competition can be from anywhere in the world also. And given our technology focus as a venture capitalist, I only talk about tech firms. So I don't talk about retail or movies, production, or cultural product like movies and programming like that. I just focus on technology from biotech to TMT to IT components. Now, the drivers for that globalization is really a number of areas. One is just commonly known. Information is now diffused so quickly. In blockchain, it's going to compress a lot faster than internet knowledge base. And as we speak, I know that China, the Academy of Engineering, as people quite involved in global standard forming for blockchain technologies. They're engaged, as we are, as we speak, to create the standard for global blockchain. So it did not happen before. Before they tend to be a little bit behind the curve and copy and imitate what we have learned, but it's still going to change. So if we speak, blockchain firms are being developed in China. At least I know 8 or 9 applications that's been built, funded, that are creating blockchain companies. So the diffusion create this lower barrier to entry also because the hosting is so easily done. The hosting firms in China, they're as strong as US-based hosting firm. So anyone can now build cloud-based applications by just paying to be online versus in the old days, you need to pay a lot of money to do that. So there's one driver. The other driver is really customers who are pulling you. And I'll come back and talk about an example in our portfolio. It's a China-based firm that's now global because the customer pushed them to go outside China. And the third is the supply chain pull. If you're doing anything that's product that need chips, you can design here, but you will find very quickly that 95% of your supply relationships are in China. And so rather than fight back and forth and only have 5 people here go design and the other team are in China, we find a lot of examples where IoT design firms basically uproot themselves and move to Shanghai and create a business in China now. And we see a lot of them coming because of the supply chain pool. I'm working with the MIT spin-out to exactly that. They come up with this innovation, they got a prototype, and then they approach us, they say, how do we make this? How do we ship this out at lower cost? How do we export it from somewhere else? Because they don't want to ship it back to Boston and then ship it somewhere else. So it turns out it's all done in China. And so it's going to pull a lot of firms to in China or other regions because of that supply chain relationship. But of course, cost benefit justifications make you want to go global quickly. But most importantly, it's just really the entrepreneurs who want to be the generation go from somewhere else, going to create business that can be somewhere else, because it's just not fun to just targeting US-based customer anymore. So entrepreneurs who want to be in the position to create global startups. In our deal flow, when I first started talking about the concept of global startup 10 years ago with my partner, Michael, there was about maybe 10 to 15% of our deal flow we consider global startups. Now it's about 40%. We expect that in the next maybe 5 to 10 years, it can be 80 to 100% of venture deal flow that are global startups by definition because of the pool in the market. Now, given that it's a blockchain conference, so I'll add a slide on what's the impact of blockchain on global startup phenomenon. As I mentioned earlier in my earlier talks, the key is really the application first. So you got to create a solution to address a problem and create a big market for it. If blockchain can add a lot of value to make it happen, then there's a reason to add to it. But given that blockchain is so well known around the world, when you talk about idea that would take this smart contract and distributed ledgers, someone in Israel can do as quickly as we are, or in Russia, or in Cambridge, Massachusetts, for Cambridge, UK. So you really have to be aware that when you get involved in a new company, you really think about who the next competitors, not in California, but somewhere else. And then your job is to go quickly. You got to really replicate yourself. And I won't cite examples, but there are many cases historically when US firms go to China, they just came in like 3 years too late. Even Apple failed a couple of times on business development because they came in too late, because we built a relationship. And so you really have to go early. Our goal as an investor is when that happens, we can bring you there early and start to build a partnership early in the cycle, so that when time comes, you actually want to strike a deal, or they have 4 to 5 years experience in China. There's a reason why we headquartered Drum Tower Ventures in Shanghai rather than the Valley or Boston, even though we know that our source of deal flow can be from this region or from Boston. But to help our portfolio, we need to be in China to build a relationship locally for them. It won't help if you fly in and just build a relationship as you are, but we are there now to bring in the relationship that we have developed over a long period of time. And so this new area of digital trust, I highlight that by italic, is because it's really changed the whole concept of what data is all about, how data is being used on a blockchain platform. That digital trust turns out make a lot of changes that you don't probably envision at this point. And our goal is to find companies that can take advantage of this component of trust of contents, combine it, there's a word, combining with AI, big data, cloud computing, IoT. Because blockchain itself is a concept of a platform, the component of give you features, but to make applications that is unique and market leading, you got to really talk about convergence. That is a concept that originated about maybe 10 years ago when I went to MIT, and we started to have programs at MIT where you can get joint degrees between mechanical engineering and computer science, or between medicine and IT, or between business and language. And all this because the next wave of application is really IT is being applied to the rest of the economy, and you take big data, AI, and IoT inputs and analysis to create new applications that cannot be done in the 4th-3rd generation. So conceptually, I would encourage you to think about what you do is don't just look at the platform, look at the component, and how to enhance what's being done. Because enhancement to existing app is just marginal. And you want to be quantum leap above that. When you do a quantum leap above the current concept application, you can do a lot more. And now, what is that? I don't know. My job is to analyze what you produce. I try to think of like what's the best 5G application beyond the 4G. If you take Didi or Uber, it's a 4G, right? You got a mobile app, you can now link all the cars together, and the person could hold the phone, still have a mobile app application. But if you take one step further, and you take Mobike or OVO, then you got the IoT component in the bicycle now. And you can now, almost like a first generation 5G application, where you take IoT backend, you feed data into a central database. Turns out they do a lot of AI. They do a lot of business development using analysis of the software to create functions and incentive and business models around the convergence of IT. Now, if you look at how that model is being exported now to China, to US, and around the world, there's that wave of application now is what we see coming out from China. That's really what we need to worry about, is that the next wave of firms that come from China, there's a business model that we have to now imitate. In fact, I mentioned some earlier, WeChat, if you look at the application, it's really combining eBay, Netflix, and a bunch of stuff together, and it's what we call a super app. Basically, on one application, you can do what we can do here in 4 different applications. Who can think of that? Because his CTO at WeChat could just decide to write super apps with everything built in. And that is being now exported, and you will see a lot of copying of that. Now, there's a third wave of company coming out in global startup beyond the first, which is internet-based. Second is really you move to China because of the supply chain requirements. And the third is original firm coming from China now to the rest of the world. And Alibaba and Tencent are the first wave. And I think we have a few that will come out that will actually be observable going shortly. Now, the drivers is really you are. You are the one who want to create it, and they say, you're going to stop you. And so our job is to help you to fulfill your dreams. And it's proven that historically, if you target overseas global market for the first time, you're going to be 2 times better performers than if you take the traditional model of state-by-state expansion around the world. And as I mentioned earlier, it's going to be a bigger percent of the venture deal flow. And so I hope that when you think about your model, think about global startup concepts rather than just a traditional state-by-state expansion. But there are challenges when you think about global startups. Your limited resources, you're new. How do you think about global market the first day? And then it's hard to figure out how to do it. Now that I have a bigger audience, I can ask a question that I was going to survey earlier. Out of this group who come to the conference, how many actually fly in for this conference from all of the country? There are 3 or 4. There'll be more of those in the future. Now, for those who are from local, how many originally come from somewhere else? So there are about 3 of those. And there'll be more of those. Now, in the old days, they have to move to the valley to do the innovation because the ecosystem's here. But we see what will happen is the home country, they have an innovation ecosystem in place, like I would say Finland, right? Or Israel, or UK, Cambridge. There are many, and Russia. And so they can now do all the same thing without having to live here because of the internet, the communications, the access of information can now, in fact, we talk about cloud funding, crypto funding. All of it can be done over the network now without having to be local. And the threat organization is going to make it easier. Now, the problem is the VC industry is traditional. And I'm a traditional VC, so I don't think about crypto as quick as some of you are. But if you go to some of the VCs here, even in the valley, they're like 2 hours away. And if you don't focus US market, don't talk to me. Because if there are some that have a Chinese affiliation, they send to China partners, and they take over from there. It doesn't work. You have to be a partner who is in charge of the firm and help it go global. And try to send to a junior partner in China and help it go global. It doesn't work because they don't have the same interest and incentive as a headquarter venture capitalist. So worse yet, they say, well, you're wrong. And don't listen to that because they're never wrong. It's just a matter of they are wrong in thinking about how to approach the business. So we hope that we are one of the few first firms who actually create a global venture capital model that take care of that global solid concept and help you grow the business. And our job is to learn from you and develop the business together. But we believe 100% that the next wave of innovation have to come from global startups that go global quickly. And how do we help? We are also small ourselves, right? We are a new entrepreneurial startup ourselves. My partner and I have 25 years experience in venture capital. You can go to our website, you can check it out. And I worked in the US and came back to China. My partner worked in the US, one of the early VCs in 1996 in China. And we joined forces 10 years ago. And we are also small. So our goal is to really network as a Fed organization to have the right resources that we can bring in to help you at the right time with the right resources. And since we're early stage investors, we actually frequently will actually just consult with you for a couple of years for free. Just really see how you think, how you receive ideas, how we learn together before we write the first check. We're willing to do that. And in some cases, we're requested by the company to go join them for a year on a part-time basis to help business development. We've done it a couple of times as well. And so our goal is really get engaged and build a relationship. And then at the back end, we're building a lot of white papers and how-to manuals so that as we learn more with the process how to go global, we document it and share it on a best practice basis with the entrepreneurs. Now, I was mentioning there's an example I want to just highlight. Now, this is one I mentioned earlier, where it's a business that is good on its own merit. There's value to be added with what it does, but it's not blockchain driven because it was built 3 years ago. They will look at blockchain being a platform. So what do? It's a Shanghai-based firm. What they do is they have a software package that lets you evaluate employees. Like in the old days, you do resume search, keywords, and say, well, what school, what company you used to work for, what's your discipline, and then you sort out of the 50,000 applicants, 1,000 that you want to actually interview or talk to by phone. But that process we think is unfair. So the new way is use big data, go for analysis, to figure out historically, based on the experience, what kind of outcome you produce. And so when an applicant comes in, we give them 10 questions on the mobile phone, they answer it, and then we look at the answer, the word they used, and match it with history on what kind of outcome we can predict their performance would be. And so this is really a new way for being more fair. So this example where we have L'Oreal, which is a French company who use our software in Shanghai to select employee for customer service. And L'Oreal, being in China, they're willing to give us everything they know about the database of the applicants to us for analysis. There's one advantage of AI in China because data is available without restrictions. And so we go to the analysis, and then we actually source the resume. So there's a third-tier small city applicants who are not in the top-tier school. She got accepted to be an employee and performed very well. And so under the historical matrix, she'll be dropped in the first round of cutting. And so we believe that there's a social angle on what we do in such a way that it becomes more fair on employee selection. And turns out another outcome was when we look at the screening, if you look at traditional resume search by people or by keyword, the ratio tend to be towards male, just the nature of the process these days. In our case, it's 50-50, it turns out, because there's no gender differentiation on how you answer the questions. Now, this firm, with L'Oreal being a customer, 2 years ago, had a $50,000 contract. They asked us to go to Southeast Asia, and then eventually they get to headquarters. And so they have now 7-figure income with L'Oreal globally because their software is now being used to select employees. And then in the last 2 years, we started to expand overseas. And now 60% of the revenue now are from outside China. And we incorporate the firm into the Netherlands company And we expect that we can go public now in any stock exchange in Europe or in Asia or in the US. And there's how a global Chinese firm is now being globalized because of the customer pool. We expect that more will be coming from China that way. And we hope that Sitlink will be one of the leading firms in the HR space in the next generation of firms. And just a page about us. We focus on early stage companies, and we look for really global startups. And we hope that at this first round of focus, we look for a firm that has a strong connection to China, because we are there to help you with business expansion and local government relations and understanding the market itself. And we focus on traditional software TMT space. Our goal is to really help you as an early stage investor and bend it in the situation if needed. That's a way to help with the business. And this is my quick introduction of the idea of global startup. So I'll open for any questions. I have 10 minutes. Is the microphone? Okay. Yeah, I think depends on what industry. I think we have to go industry super specifically. So that's why cloud computing is the advantage, right? Because you don't share the software. So for cloud computing, I think you can be sure the IP protection is as strong anywhere. In the old days, when you have software that's on a disk, it's easily copyable. But in terms of business model, I think it's now going both ways. IPO business model is really not defined, right? So to answer the question, our job as an investor is to help the firm with the partners that we can trust. And so we spend a lot of time knowing the entrepreneur, knowing the partners before we write the first check. We spend a lot of time knowing the partners before we introduce to our US firms, because we want to avoid any problems down the road. And if you walk in the first time and you have 2 months or a week in a big relationship, that's very risky. So our job is, as an investor, to help you sort through some of the partners, so that at the end, when it comes to manufacturers or government locations that can help you expand your business, we actually have a priority list we can introduce to you. It's a way to avoid the IP issue that has been perceived to be inexistent. Now, given that said, the next wave is really more like Chinese firms worry about the IP being stolen in the US. I mean, I'm not joking. It has been complaining about that to the government, that Chinese firms' IP is not being copied in the US. So I think, to be fair, when the issue is brought up, it's a little bit biased, because ultimately, it's your job as an entrepreneur, it's your job with your partners to protect yourself wherever you go, even in the valley across the street. And so hope that answers your question. Okay. Sorry, if you ask the crypto environment in China, there was a session that we spent. Oh, the question was, do I want to talk about the crypto environment in China? There was a session on it yesterday. We discussed for half an hour. Show me the hands. How many want to hear the answer again? I can repeat it. But if,
just a one-sentence answer.
If the crypto, as I mentioned yesterday, it cannot produce money that's perceived to replace RMB, and if you are trying to compete with the government on money, it's not clean anywhere in the world, including US, by the way, they'll fight it. And so what I propose is, if you can create a unit of exchange that's backed by value, and then you do it as a thing, because the definition of that thing called crypto is different in US versus Europe. ours define it as a thing, so that you pay taxes. If you buy and sell, you have capital gains from last year, just in case you have to report it. In Europe, there's no sales tax, there's no capital gain or loss, because it's the currencies. So if it's become a thing, then you have accounting rules around it that can actually work. So I think in China, if you want to create some unit of exchange, it's fine, but don't create anything that compete with money.
So we have 5 minutes for questions, but let's
No, I forgot the question. It doesn't seem like American companies have had much success entering the Chinese market. From my perspective, China basically copies the model. You talk about WeChat. If you block Facebook, Google, others from entering the market, they can just create and copy whatever they want. Alibaba copies Amazon, et cetera. So that being a risk for an American company trying to go over there, how do you guys address that problem?
Well, that's beyond my pay rate. I'm not a government employee. I'm not even a Chinese citizen. So I cannot address for Chinese government. But according to the policy I've read, they do have a preference to support domestic firms. They do have a preference to create global brand companies. They come up with China, from the Huawei of the world to CTE of the world to even car manufacturers to airplane. So it's on the game plan. And now, given that said, well, if I were a government like China, why would I want to do that? If I were powerful enough to create my own brand, to be a global player, especially when China has 5 times the population than the US. So if I create any product that can be self-sufficient for 1.5 billion people, why not? And so I think it's a policy that I have read, or I read, I just repeat for you. If it's right or wrong, I don't want to make a judgment call on it. It's not my job, yeah.
Hello.
Yep.
Yeah, my name is Danny. I'm the founder of a hardware company called Illmatic. And you're mentioning doing trade with China. I recently read an article about new restrictions.
Don't use tech transfer because I'm not here to look at tech transfer company. I look at global startup that has a global market potential. If you have tech transfer, ask someone else. I'm not interested in that.
I'm interested in the tariffs and restrictions that President Trump is imposing on certain goods and the possibility of those carrying over into electronics and how that might affect, you know.
I'm not going to comment on, I can comment on Donald Trump's policy. I can comment on President Xi Jinping's response. It's beyond my pay rate again. But I can address is, one thing to be cautious is if Chinese firm cannot buy American companies, they just create their own. We have received a business plan on the chip designers whose ambition is to create the next Qualcomm, Broadcom in China. And is it doable? Time will tell. But from the market stacks, just in case you don't believe it, I've seen slides that says the electronics market is going to be 3 times bigger than today globally 15 years from now. And there will be a lot of need for 80% of those customers could be low in supply because the hardware is too expensive. And this is all advantage for China. So this firm thinks they can create the next Broadcom supplying to 80% of the companies of the world who need the low-end products. So is it doable? Time will tell. But there's a risk the US runs by not allowing business relationships to be developed across the countries.
Hi. So when you're uniting the world, how do you unite everyone culturally? You know, because I see a lot of balkanization in the whole decentralization movement, right? You have different countries who speak a different language. You know, how do we become one? How do we unite everyone?
Right. I personally do my part. I travel around the world 6 times a year to all the conferences I need to go to build friends. My LinkedIn network is like all over. It's my preference. But it's really ultimately your upbringing, I think. How you got brought up as an individual, how your personal culture affect how you become a global citizen. So just think about the global citizens beyond global startups. I think it's a way to think about it.
All right. Well, I think a round of applause for speaking at 3 sessions at this event. Thank you so much, and thank you, Stan. And if you want to see, he's speaking at my event next week if you want to see him again. So again, I run Angel Launch Events. I'm an independent event producer who partnered with Raphael to help with this conference, and I have 2 events next week, so the fun doesn't have to stop tonight. On Tuesday is a free event in San Francisco with a speaker who's here right now on FinTech and blockchain funding and investing. And Thursday is AI and robotics in Palo Alto. Next, we'd like to present Reese Jones, who is an angel investor who's going to talk about the future evolution of blockchain, and he's been very active in this space.
Hi, my name's Reese, and perhaps we'll change the pace a little bit and talk about the future of blockchain and in a way that you might find useful to predict it on your own. And that the basic premise is that blockchain is like genetics, it's like biology, it's like DNA. And the way DNA evolved will help you anticipate how blockchain and the different kinds of blockchains will likely evolve in the future. And so the future doesn't repeat itself from history, it rhymes or it echoes. So it's not a precise copy of the past, it's something that some of the things from the past can be learned to predict what's likely to happen in the future, but it's likely to be subtly different in various ways as you'll see. And so what's carried in blockchain is information, and that's what's carried in DNA and genetics. And my human genome, or each of our human genomes, is about 1.5 gigabyte of digital storage. It's 6 billion letters, 3 billion base pairs in our DNA. That is essentially our genetics. And blockchain was, or Bitcoin's blockchain, was about that size in 2012. And since then, it has been increasing in size, and it has a mechanism that records a ledger of every single transaction that's happened since Satoshi Nakamoto's Genesis block. And it continues to grow in an exponential way, but by a mathematical format that's approximately every 10 minutes, a new block is written to the blockchain of the transactions that have happened in the recent 10 minutes. And this is done by miners using an algorithm that keeps it at about 10 minutes. So if the time is getting too long, the algorithm gets simpler, so it's faster. And if this time is going too fast, the algorithm gets more complicated. So it follows a relatively smooth curve. And as you can see on the graph on the left, it's been growing to the 150 gigabytes that it is now for a full node of the whole ledger. And the mathematical algorithm, the chart on the right, is showing where it will continue to grow through essentially 2140, which is when all of the Bitcoins possible will have been mined. And so it'll cross about 1 terabyte of size in about 2022, or the end of 2022. And so this is substantially larger than the genomes of any particular kind of creature, and way larger than the information that's carried in a human genome. And so this is kind of a new kind of information store or flow that replicates with the quality and speed and reliability of computers, and is actually better at replicating information than DNA and genetics. And so what is blockchain? And I'm sure you've heard these kind of stories, but it's a system that people volunteer, like all the parties participating volunteer to participate in this algorithm and this peer way of transferring information. And it's borderless in that it operates independent of country. It's decentralized in that there isn't a central computer of blockchain. It's distributed in that the mining nodes are all over the world. There's thousands of them. And if one of them fails, the others pick up the slack. And so it will persist to replicate even if some of the components fail. So in that way, it's like the internet. And it's a replicating system in that it's, with each block that's written, it's repeating all of the prior blocks in the ledger. So it's actually a lot of data to replicate just to record some new information. And then it's a framework for how does this happen, how does the information flow, and how is it stored, and then a protocol for how it's replicated and changed over time. So what other things are kind of like that? Well, I would suggest that genetics and DNA is very much like that in all of these categories. And it's the original gangster of a decentralized, distributed, peer-to-peer replicating system, that there isn't a president of genetics, there isn't a president of blockchain or a president of the internet. It's decentralized, and that it happens in a distributed way where creatures replicating in Australia are independent of creatures replicating in Norway, and blockchain is much the same way in that, but blockchain reconciles all of its information worldwide in its current Bitcoin form anyway, and Ethereum as well. And so some of the characteristics of genetics are actually very similar to the characteristics of a distributed blockchain, unlike the way information replicates through banking and centralized databases and regular sort of information stores. And so other aspects of the information replication is there's the ledger, of course, and how does this replicate reliably at scale? And this is both from algorithms and the fact that it's distributed, in that there's not just one place that the information is being replicated. It's being replicated in parallel through many nodes of miners, and they come to a consensus agreement where if more than half of them agree on the most recent block, which also includes all the prior transactions, then it's recorded for posterity in a reliable way. And it's a mining mechanism that has a mathematical mechanism of trust, in that how you know that the current blockchain is valid is an algorithm from its hash code that you can rely on, that your transaction got entered, that all of the prior transactions are valid, and that the majority of the mining nodes agree that it's valid. And so you can trust it in some ways more than you could trust your government or your bank or a centralized database from a company, in that those kind of centralized systems can be modified at the center, and the trust in the authenticity of it is less than something that's been distributed across thousands of nodes, that if one of them were to modify it, the others would not agree that that modification was valid and reject it. And so what you're actually trusting is the consensus of many nodes and not just a single database. And then there's the speed of how fast this can happen. And Bitcoin's blockchain is relatively slow. It writes to the blockchain every 10 minutes. So if you're waiting to pay for your Starbucks coffee and it takes 10 minutes for that to happen, that'll be frustrating. So it's appropriate for some kinds of applications, but not every kind of application. And the speed also is a function of the amount of energy that it takes, and we'll touch on that a little bit in how that's a problem and a benefit from a trust and security point of view. And so DNA has these, and genetics has these same characteristics, and some deficiencies relative to blockchain, where it's kind of a ledger of information, and the biochemical reliability of copying DNA has an error rate. It's not perfect. And so the error rate is roughly 10 billion, 1 in 10 billion times the machinery of replicating DNA makes a mistake. And so that is something that limits the amount of information that can be replicated and carried in DNA. And it's a protocol that's adaptive in that the way information is copied, it's checked to make sure that it's accurate and the same as what it's copying from. And it's a parallel system that works in a distributed, decentralized way with peer-to-peer replication. And so in that way, it's similar to blockchain. And then the efficiency of it is something that isn't perfect, where the energy for replicating DNA comes from either what you eat or photosynthesis. And this is somewhat of a limit that is evolves over time, where the types of information replication in DNA, if it's not relatively efficient, it's things that are more efficient survive and things that are inefficient go extinct. And so over billions of years, DNA and genetics has evolved a way to throw away information that blockchain still keeps, and to make a more efficient system that survives. And so where the energy comes from to replicate the DNA is, in the case of animals, is predation, where the animals eat other life forms in order to generate the biochemical energy to replicate themselves, whereas blockchain uses electricity in the mining systems to collect the energy to run the algorithms to replicate the information in a reliable way. And the graph in the center is the amount of compute power that's required to replicate the blockchain in a measure of petahashes. And as you can see, it's been going up extremely rapidly relative to other things, in that the amount of computations required to replicate a new block is getting more and more intensive. And even though there's custom chips now made for mining rigs that do this particular computation very rapidly, they still consume a lot of electricity. And the amount of electricity that Bitcoin's blockchain is consuming is growing somewhat similar to this chart, even with the efficiencies. And so eventually it will pass the amount of electricity that is used by humans for all other things if it continues on this path. And so that's a downside, and then it uses a lot of electricity. This can come from solar and other sources, but it's an inefficiency that maybe is not necessary for how Bitcoin's blockchain works today. And there are a number of efforts to use proof of stake or proof of space and time or other algorithms that are much more energy efficient is one way that this might change the dynamic. But they won't be Bitcoin's blockchain, they'll be something else, and like a new species. And so a blockchain, I would suggest, is like a species, like a bird or a fish or a plant. And Bitcoin's blockchain is one of those, but in the evolution, there will likely be many. And we'll talk about that more. But the efficiency is one of the main natural selection criterion of what survives and thrives and what gets constrained to a niche to operate or goes extinct. And so how information flows through life is similar to how it flows through blockchain, in that in life, the information comes from the parents in the form of DNA, and then the DNA is what's carried from generation to generation. And then as the creature metabolizes, the DNA, like the code in the DNA, is turned into RNA, which is turned into proteins and enzymes, which then is turned into the chemicals that is our metabolic life. And at the when an individual's life stops, this chain reaction stops, and the information is still in the genetics, and you can clone a deceased organism and restart it again. But the metabolism is a flow of information. It's not just a container of information. And so how does this work, or what is the equivalent of metabolism in blockchain? I would suggest that the blockchain is the information, and the metabolism of a particular blockchain, say Bitcoin's blockchain, is the token Bitcoin, and then the applications and organizations that are consuming or metabolizing that. And so there are now many different kinds of blockchains and many more kinds of tokens and applications and organizations that make use of them. And so an app that's built on the Ethereum blockchain, for example, is metabolizing differently than an app built on Bitcoin's blockchain. So this is similar to or parallel to how metabolism works in living things, where the information is in our genetics, and the metabolism is what we eat and how that's turned into our life as it continues on. And a blockchain is like a species, and a species in biology has a particular pattern of genetic information. And so there's a phenomenon called speciation, where two different creatures evolve from a single one. Say donkeys and horses evolve from a common ancestor, and they have mostly the same information, but they start down different paths. And the equivalent to this in blockchain is forking, where the original information is replicated, and then you have two different species evolving with different apps and different tokens and different metabolism into different species that are have a common origin but are now different. And so what happens to these different species is they're subject to natural selection, just like in biology. And the ones that are the fit an environment or an application and a token that fits a particular function or niche in the ecosystem is more likely to survive and thrive better than the ones that don't have the mix of characteristics that you would want for it to survive. And there's natural ecosystems that are a combination of many different species. And so it's not just Bitcoin versus Ethereum versus many of the others. It's that they will all likely coexist in the blockchain equivalent of a rainforest, and which ones survive or not are based on that. And so what people do is they selectively breed these things and say, well, we want the particular kind of potato or corn or animal that we like to eat, and so we'll make more of them. And this is a monoculture, or breeding these things to be all the same. And so this is good in that you get more of what you want, but it's bad in that it creates a vulnerability where monoculture breeds essentially an environment that disease can very quickly wipe out a whole design. So if everybody were to standardize on Bitcoin's blockchain, it has a risk that maybe its energy inefficiency or how long it takes or some of the other characteristics could wipe it out in one step. And so what happens in biology is things diversify into many different kinds of species. With the tree of life, as many people have learned, there is the animals and the plants and the microbes and all the different creatures have a common origin, but they're essentially cousins of each other. And these bifurcations are one kind of speciation, and another is a mutation or a change where things that started out as the same species, when they evolve into something different, they're now different. They no longer can interbreed with their common origin. And so here's a more complicated graph of the tree of life, where there's the genesis block, or the original DNA species that is down at the bottom about 4 billion years ago, and then all the different species that have diverged since then. And so on this, from microbes on the left to plants in the middle to mammals on the right, everybody is cousins of each other, and that they're all different and they can't necessarily interbreed, and they each have different characteristics. But blockchain is likely to go through this same evolutionary path from the way it is now to many different versions than exist today. And which ones survive won't necessarily be predictable in advance. It's the ones that are the most adaptable to a changing environment. And so that changing ecosystem, of course, the climate is changing, the population is changing, food supplies are changing. And in blockchain, what people use it for is unpredictable in the future. And it's likely that ones that are dominant now won't necessarily be the dominant ones in the future, that there will likely be changes from different kinds of forces. And what happened in biology is there was a time about 500 million years ago where there was a few different forms of life that all of a sudden exploded into millions of different forms of life, called the Cambrian explosion, where the life of all different types became more diversified. And this is likely to happen to blockchain. And that in the Cambrian explosion, there were a few types, maybe a few thousand, like there's a few thousand different kinds of blockchains and tokens now, and it went to millions of different species. So is this likely to happen to blockchain where everybody has a token and everybody has a different version? It's quite likely if it follows the same path as biology. And so in the further future, the biochemical information store of life is extending. It's not changing, it's extending, where the genetics that makes up me is part of who I am. There's also my culture and what I learned and what I was taught growing up. And then it's extending beyond that, and that how much of myself have I put in the internet, and how much of me is in Facebook, and then how much of me is on the blockchain. And so there's a digital part of me and a biochemical part of me, and they both make up me, and they will survive for different amounts of time. So there's kind of a evolution of the complexity of life from simple biochemical to information plus biochemical. And so what makes up a person today is becoming more information and less biochemical. In that, still a mix of both, but we're more information than we are biochemical, and the information with the capabilities of blockchain is improving in terms of the vastness of the amount of information that can be carried over time, as well as the proportion that's digital information versus biochemical. And so this information flows across time, in that the chemicals in our body change on a regular basis over years, and that our memories, though, stay in our mind persistent, although the chemicals that are storing our memories are changing with our metabolism. And so there's an illusion that our memories are the same, but when you test memories subjectively, or quantitatively, you find that the memory that we think we had is actually different than what happened in most cases. And so this is a flow of information across time with the substrate changing, where the chemicals that are our biochemistry are changing, but we perceive ourselves as being the same across time. And so in a sense, what our life is mostly information that is changing across time in much the same way as, say, a wave goes across the ocean and then crashes on the beach, where the water in the ocean is not really moving sideways, just the wave is moving sideways, and the water goes up and down. And so in our life, moving across time, our perception of life is much more like a wave, and it's getting more complicated and more intricate with these digital forms. But in the end, our life is much more like a wave than it's like a particle in this wave-particle duality. So that's where I'll stop for any questions. Thank you very much. I can hear it. So you asked if the law of accelerating returns is related to the exponential change that Ray Kurzweil talks about. And I helped start Singularity University, so I'm very familiar with the details of this. And the law of accelerating returns is that there's an acceleration in the rate of change, or in change of information technologies in particular. And so things are getting faster, like your phone is getting twice as good every year, and the internet is getting better, and the computers are getting better. And so the ability to do things in digital information is accelerating. And so it is very related, and this is somewhat similar ideas.
if prior to blockchain, we had distributed databases, we had cryptography, encryption, we had networking, what was it about Bitcoin and blockchain? What was the one thing that made all of this possible? And if there was one thing, how does that one thing evolve over time and still produce the results of the original intent from the perspective of why it was created in the first place? You understand where I'm coming from?
Yeah, understood. So for me, the blockchain is an evolution of internet protocols that before that there was file transfer protocol and simple mail protocol and these kind of things for moving information from one place to the next. And there have been mechanisms of saying, when it's left me and gone to you, the information that I have is now tagged as old, and what you have is tagged as new and unique. And this is important for money, where if I send you $1, the dollar you have should work, and the one I have should stop working. Otherwise, it's the double spend problem, and it didn't transfer. And so blockchain specifically was designed for electronic money, or electronic cash.
What's the mechanism that enables the prevention of a double spend?
And so the main breakthrough of blockchain in Satoshi Nakamoto's implementation was an algorithm and a mining and a consensus that we both volunteer to participate in. We both agree that our transaction will be written into the system, and then a distributed network of computers tag that with a unique hash as a transaction, and then continue to validate that that transaction happened, it wasn't undone, and it's now history.
Would you agree that it's proof of work that enables?
Well, the mathematical mechanism that it uses is called proof of work, or is using proof of work. But proof of work, as I mentioned, is very energy and compute intensive and inefficient. And so it's...
So I guess what I would just say is that if it's proof of work, and we agree that it's proof of work, that is what's key in all this, how does proof of work itself evolve? That's where I was driving.
So proof...
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm going to stop Reese because we time for one more question, but I invite you to talk to Reese afterwards as soon as we're done and engage, because we might have... Do we have another question from the audience? Okay. All right, fine. Well, then we're going to go to the next session, but feel free to continue to talk to Reese. We have one more question over here. All right, thank you. Wait, can you wait for the mic? Wait for the mic.
Do you see Hashgraph as an evolution of blockchain? And if so, do you think it will be successful? Why or why not?
Yeah, so Hashgraph and proof of stake and proof of time and space and all kinds of other proof of storage, there's a whole bunch of algorithms that are evolving as different species of blockchains. And some will likely survive for certain niches, just like fish are better in the ocean and cacti are better in the desert. And so there's not likely to be one, there's likely to be many, and each ones will be better at different things, like more efficient, faster, more reliable, various characteristics of blockchain.
All right. Thank you. Let's give a round of applause. Thank you very much, Reese.
Thank you.
We'll be here for a few minutes.
Yeah.
He'll be outside if you want to talk to him further. We're going to go right into our next speaker, Aditya Kadiyala from Oracle, who's going to talk to us about what's happening to blockchain in the enterprise world.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me today. So today, I'm going to share with you some of the work we've been doing around reducing supply chain risks with blockchain and IoT. So supply chains have been around for a very long time. And as the global trade grew since the 70s and 80s, supply chains have been evolving. And at different points in time, different strategies were harnessed or implemented to solve for various kind of challenges. With the evolution of blockchain and IoT, we have a unique opportunity to take it to the next level by orders of magnitude, and also help with the digital transformation efforts and the faster cycles across the globe that we've been seeing. So let's dive into some of that. All right. So if you look at the supply chains of today, and if you're to speak to the SVP or the EVP of supply chain in any manufacturing company or retail company, right? So these are the 5 factors that they consistently and constantly look to optimize for, right? How do they keep the costs manageable? How do they address different kinds of risks? The speed of delivery from the time of manufacture to the time that customer purchases the goods, and how do they innovate with new products, and how do they keep the whole end-to-end ecosystem agile, right? So, and if you look at supply chains, right, there are fundamentally 3 classes of problems out there. The first and foremost is fraud. If you look at the pharmaceutical industry, in the developing countries, 15% of the medicines are counterfeit. In developed countries, at least 1% of the pharmaceuticals are counterfeit. And the problem is even more severe if you are looking at what we call as cold chain products. The top 20 medicines are mostly cold chain medicines. That means they need to be refrigerated all times. Your vaccines are mostly cold chain. So the problem is compounded because along the supply chain continuum, they use different third-party services for trucking, storage, and such. And there is a wide variety in terms of the technological sophistication and quality and consistency of maintenance. So therefore, about 25% of vaccines, by the time they reach their destination, they're in degraded state, right? So, and in food, it's also a similar problem for wine, milk, meats, and flours, all these temperature-sensitive products. And interestingly enough, fraud in food is also quite rampant. There is deliberate fraud, and then there is mistakes that happen, right? If you consumed extra virgin organic olive oil between 2012 and 2016, very likely you consumed a mislabeled or marginally fraudulent or counterfeit organic olive oil. So there are tons and tons of studies and reports around these, so we can go on and on, but you get the message. And if you look at luxury goods and spare parts, again, counterfeit is very, there's a lot of problem with fraud. And then while companies and supply chains try to address all this, as customers, we want more transparency, we want things faster, easier to use, et cetera, et cetera. So the next class of problems is around operations and logistics. Across the global supply chains, if you look at the number of nodes and things that could go wrong, it's quite impressive that we have so many little incidents, and that's because of the years of technological innovations and all the things the ecosystem has put in to make sure that incidents don't happen. And still, World Economic Forum says that 10,000 containers get lost in the sea, right? And there are inefficiencies and manual processes that cause a lot of entropy in the system. The third class of challenges is around recall. And all of us have experienced recalls in one way or the other from automobiles or things that we buy. And the simple question of where did this particular item or product come from is surprisingly complicated because they're sourced from multiple different suppliers, made in different manufacturing plants, shipped via multiple distributors and retailers, et cetera. For example, when the mad cow disease broke out, there was an outcry from the consumers because they found out that the meat packet that we buy in the retail stores the meat didn't come from one cow. It might have had from 6 or 7 different cows. And also in other meat-related recalls, the meat might not be that of beef to begin with. Horse meat was mixed with the beef and so on, right? So all these issues happen, and when a recall needs to be handled, then it's a very complicated and cumbersome process. And today we're going to talk about, how are we going to solve for some of these three big classes of problems, right? And in light of this, right, what we keep relentlessly seeing is supply chains are constantly infused with newer and newer technologies. Today, even in warehouses, they're fairly sophisticated with robots and augmented reality-based stock picking and so on. And today we'll focus more on blockchain and IoT. All right. So I just want to touch base quickly on IoT. I'm fairly positive that most of the audience are familiar with what IoT is and how it's used and such. But there are a few nuances that I'd like to draw upon. Well, we try to use this broad brushstrokes of something called IoT. Under the covers, it's very different strategies and technology implementations, right? A similar analogy is, when you say something is a vehicle, it could be a rocket ship or a bicycle or a train, but under the implementation of them is fundamentally different, right? In a similar way, if you're tracking fleets versus tracking still assets like HVACs and or a MRI machine, the mechanics of doing that, the underlying technical architecture, the business functionality of that kind of track and trace is fundamentally different. Right? So we have different classes. These are just some of the top ones that we usually see, but there are many more. And in supply chain, we tend to see a combination of these usually. As you try to make supply chains more and more watertight, you want to have more information which you can, in a sense, actuate upon. Then you tend to use a combination of these IoT strategies. And these days, we're also seeing an infusion of visualization techniques like augmented reality used along with IoT. And when you point your iPad at a machine, the IoT data is overlaid on the augmented reality image, and then you can issue voice commands or use a chatbot to interact with the machine, issue remote procedures on the machine, and so on. So it's far more interactive, very useful for the machine operators. And as you have predictive maintenance kind of issues as well, you can solve for those much more efficiently than with other mechanisms that we have used in the past. All right. So then let's move quickly to blockchain. Probably I'll skip this because most of you are familiar with blockchain. But specifically in the enterprise space, though, the nature and purpose of why blockchains are used is a bit different from the way Bitcoin and Ethereum and other permissionless blockchains are used. In the customers that we speak to very regularly, they're most interested in permissioned blockchains, private blockchains, where somebody like a large retailer might say, hey, all my suppliers, you are required to be on this blockchain so that we can do trading far more easily. All right. And from a company like Oracle that focuses predominantly on B2B market, right? So there are some special enterprise considerations that we need to take into factor. And many of our products are come with those built-in features. And at Oracle, we use the Hyperledger as the blockchain as a blockchain framework that we use. And around that, we also built several value-added features. The ones that you see in the blue is what comes from the Hyperledger fabric, and the ones that and the red boxes is what Oracle is building, and we have plans to go above and beyond as we scale up. And one of the most common questions I get from our customers is, what about mining? Blockchain is inefficient. It can't handle the kind of transactions that we are looking for, right? Yes, some blockchains need mining because of their permissionless nature, but Hyperledger Fabric, and permission blockchains can be run without the need for mining, and therefore, first of all, none of our customers use mining, because they run the node themselves, and they already have other IT infrastructure that they are running. So this is, one more that they're running along with the rest of their IT architecture. And they have an innate business interest to run the blockchain node because it simplifies their operations, gives them a better transparency and traceability, and so on. All right. So, and most vendors like Oracle and others that operate around Hyperledger Fabric, we have our own value-added features on top of what Hyperledger Fabric offers. And at Oracle, given that we have a lot of enterprise systems like supply chain management systems, enterprise resource planning systems, and so on, we naturally try to pre-integrate with all those as much as possible. All right, coming back to the supply chain discussion. So as we talked about, there are different classes of problems that we're trying to solve for, but all of them can be framed under a common set of technology solutions using a combination of IoT and blockchain. And it's first and foremost, we're trying to solve for traceability across the supply chain continuum. And as we do that, we also get into the transparency aspects of it. And today, if you look at the demands of the customers, and they want more and more transparency. They want to know that, okay, the cotton for their baby's clothes is actually the right kind of certified Egyptian cotton, or the beef that they're eating comes from the certified organic one, and that they're able to ascertain that in a credible way beyond what's printed on the package, right? And today, we are looking at solutions where, for example, if I pick up a salsa bottle in the grocery store, I can point my phone at a QR code, and it'll give me very rich labeling information about, okay, where was it processed, what kind of farms it came from, does it have allergens, and some of them offer chatbots that you can also interact with, and so on. So this kind of transparency was unprecedented before, and because of blockchain and IoT, you can bring these kind of solutions to customers. All right, so I call IoT and blockchain as the wine and cheese combination. Both are very nice independently, and they don't need each other, but when used together, they bring in some very compelling solutions. So when we look at the spectrum of supply chain solutions out there in the market, there is actually quite a few use cases that we can solve for. First and foremost is in the track and trace, along the supply chain continuum, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. The second one, I'll go out of order from what you see in the slide here a little bit. We're already looking at things like self-driving trucks and other kinds of automation coming into the picture, and even self-driven ships and so on. So when you have this kind of a situation, you can actually automate some of the underlying paperwork and remove some of the manual processes and the inefficiencies that come as a result of the manual paperwork, right? That's number one. Number two, even if you have a human-driven truck, for example, automating something like the bill of lading, which is a regulatory document that you're supposed to carry around in the truck when moving goods. There is a lot of fraud that happens and forgery that happens, especially with smuggling kind of activities and counterfeit activities. So by automating them, you can minimize some of those issues, and automating the bill of lading also helps you automate some of the payments related use cases. For example, what we are hearing from some of the customers is that today there are net 60 and net 45 kind of arrangements where somebody delivers the goods to me, and I take my own sweet time of 45 days or 60 days or whatever my contract allows me to pay them. So far, that has worked in the interest of some companies, and the ecosystem has, settled into certain pattern. But, technology and the customer demands and the pace of the business cycles are beginning to, shake that kind of an arrangement, because it puts a lot of undue pressure on the smaller players, and they run into cash flow situations and so on. So trade finance is also a very important area where blockchain is making a dent and bringing good value across the ecosystem. And I'll move quickly, and there are a few other solutions as well. And I'd like to leave some time for Q&A in the end. All right, we're talking about product traceability, right? The fundamental challenge is that the raw materials or the components are sourced from multiple different vendors across different geographic regions, and they're assembled and manufactured in multiple plants. And this is a very, very simplistic image just to illustrate the concept. And then they use several third-party logistics providers, or sometimes they may have their own fleets to transport. And then eventually it reaches the end customer. Now, where IoT helps is now you can track where it's coming from. And even in the manufacturing process, let's say if a certain batch has failed or if a certain machine is operating out of tolerances, you can catch those using IoT. And all these special incidents, events that you want to track, you can persist to the blockchain. And now you can have different stakeholders part of this blockchain, or sometimes it may be a series of blockchains too, and that's fine. And now all of us have the same version of truth, okay, that this machine or this component got manufactured in this assembly line in this factory, and machine number 52 was having a high scrap situation, and because of that, maybe the shear strain of this rod is not what it's supposed to be, right? And that may cause problems when it's put in aircrafts and cars and so on. So now you can actually very clearly track and trace these things, and you can preempt problems. And as you begin to capture this end-to-end information, over time, we collect data, and you can actually now begin to optimize across the system of systems, right? And you can learn algorithms to predict the cause and effect of various things on the overall quality outcome of the product. And in food industry, once again, there's a lot of activity already happening, pilots that are happening with respect to using blockchains and IoT, because this is a very near and dear problem for everyone. We have seen many recalls in the past from restaurant chains and processed food manufacturers and so on. So once again, with IoT, you're tracking the object as it moves along its supply chain continuum. And with blockchain, you're tracking these incidents and providing the information in real time to now the insurance company, the manufacturer, the distributor, the food processor. All of us have the same incident that, okay, this truck went out of the temperature limits. That means this entire shipment of shrimp may need to be reevaluated and tested before it's sent to the restaurants, right? So I know I went through quickly. I had a lot of content to cover, so I'll pause now and take questions. All right. Yeah. I mean, like all large companies, right? You start with one product and then evolve. Microsoft, started with DOS, and then it's a different company today. Oracle started with databases, and then it went into ERP, supply chain, HCM, and then many different industry vertical-specific products. So even though it's known as a database company, it's far, far beyond a database company. And blockchain is one of those technologies that makes sense to what our customers are doing in manufacturing, in supply chain, in retail. There are a lot of verticals where blockchain is a good fit. And for the purpose of just if you take the simple example of that immutable distributed ledger and everybody having the same version of truth, that itself has compelling value in terms of business operations and the automations that you can derive out of that, right? And as blockchains evolve and business models evolve, and now you overlay IoT, machine learning, and other technologies, now new and interesting opportunities open up as well, right? So it's about moving with technology and staying relevant and bringing the right kind of solutions that customers need. Yes.
And the entire process.
Yeah, the question was, they're a manufacturing startup, and how can they leverage this kind of a solution, right? Yeah, I mean, you don't need to be a Fortune 500 company to get started. Actually, we are working with several startups and mid-sized companies already as part of our. So we are in a beta program right now. We'll be GA very soon with a blockchain product. So many of these companies are already part of our beta program. So reach out to me offline, and I'll plug you in with the right people, and we can get started. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Hi. First of all, I apologize. I missed the first part of your presentation, but so you may have answered this. But how does this fit with your existing ERP systems, and especially with your certain unnamed competitor who actually has a lot of the manufacturing space for ERP? Is it kind of plug and play with that, or do you have an existing product that's plug and play with, I'll say, at SAP?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Oracle's stance from the beginning, all of our products have been open. We are standards-based and open products. It's very common for our customers to take an Oracle product and integrate with our competitors' products, right? And we have open APIs, and that has been Oracle's stance for a very long time. It's nothing new as such. And it's same for blockchain as well. It'll be interoperable with others. And we are also in an age where there's co-opetition these days, right? At a Hyperledger Fabric level, SAP is part of the foundation, Oracle is part of the foundation, Intel and all these big companies are part of the foundation, and we are collaborating and producing and contributing to that. And of course, we compete in the open market, in the customer for customers' business, and that's the nature of business these days, right? So yes, it's interoperable, and we can plug and play with any other product. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Silicon Valley, talking about investment trends for the crypto and ICO space. And we have an assortment of both traditional investors and kind of ICO investors for you to hear from. So we invite the panelists to come up. And I will mention, as I said earlier, that the expo hall will be closing at 4 p.m. today. However, we will be moving chairs and tables into the hallway, so you're welcome to stay and network as long as you want, but please not after midnight, so some of us who work here can actually go home. I have had that happen before. No, we have the space until midnight, but we encourage you to leave earlier. Or else they'll charge us for an overnight hotel room. Okay. Where's Alexi? Alexi, are you on this? I thought you started. Okay. All right, we'll start the panel.
Hey, good to see you, man. This the guy beforehand. There's one more? Are we expecting one more person? Hey guys, good afternoon to everyone. How many people are excited about ICOs? Only 4. How many people are excited about blockchain? How many folks are actually excited about ICO and a blockchain? Look at, we have 4, 5 most promising investing VCs out here who's going to advise you and help you. This panel is all about you. So what I've decided is I'm going to divide this panel for 30 minutes, 1/3 of this time, which is basically 10 minutes belonging to you, which starts at 3:20 sharp. We're going to start this panel by giving some brief introductions, and I would let the panelists speak about themselves, starting from you, sir.
Hi, everybody. So I'm representing here Project Cryptarium. Of course, you have heard a lot about this. We are a main sponsor of this. Thank you, everybody who have arrived. What about us? We are number 1 in the world of the number of token holders, 72,000 persons. We raised 51 million. Now we're developing crypto financial services, so it will help to provide payments from crypto to fiat and back. So we try to make same as fiat banks, same crypto bank, same simple. Thanks.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Duncan Logan. I'm the founder of Rocket Space. Rocket Space is a technology accelerator. It's been here in San Francisco and London for the past 7 years. We're probably most famous for a 7-person company called Uber when they were in Rocket Space, which has gone on to do pretty well. And now we're turning our focus to crypto and the blockchain. All the success we saw, we've had 18 unicorns come through Rocket Space in 7 years. And all of that success we think is going to be repeated in the blockchain crypto space. At the moment, I personally invest in ICOs and crypto. As a firm, we don't yet, but we have seen a lot of interest from capital outside of the Valley wanting to get into this space.
Thank you.
I'm Terrence Yang. I've been in Bitcoin since 2014, and I'm an angel investor in San Francisco, and I write a lot of mean tweets at Yang Ventures, so if you're bored on Twitter, you can check that out. I was also a securities lawyer and securitizations lawyer and deal manager in a prior life on Wall Street.
Hi, my name is Alexander Dio. I am a serial entrepreneur, and in the past, or I guess currently now too, run the fund, as well as participate in several ventures. I guess I was coming from the standpoint of investing first, and now I'm wearing a different hat of leading the startup company called Token IQ. So I feel the pain on both sides, from the investment standpoint as well as running the company. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Alexey Vladimirovich Koroshenko. Maybe you know me. So we do fundraising, so I know this story from opposite side to talk with investors. So give me your money, guys. So and how it's happened or not happened, and why that should happen. So and I see which project investors like and why you guys looking for some. Oh, give me allocation or whatever. Can I give you my money? And why the different projects, oh, can we write something? What are you gonna do? So I know this, I see this game from opposite sides, so this panel should be very, very interesting.
Thank you, folks. And my name is Vince Coley, and my background is actually 2 times founder in Silicon Valley over a decade here. I started career with Accenture, raised no money for my first startup, and no money for my second startup. So I really don't know how to raise money, but I know how to raise definitely customers' money and interest. I've started a new program at Silicon Valley called Problem Thinking. So I'm an inventor of the program. It's basically called Why Fail Fast When You Can Fail Exponentially. So the program is called The Exponential Failure. That's my little background. And I was a high-frequency trader between 2009 and 13 at Wall Street, worked with Fidelity and E-Trade. So the first question to our panel is simple question. The question, which is the title of the panel, is how Silicon Valley investors can actually invest in ICOs and blockchain ventures. So please feel free to start, whoever you like.
I can start. So the first point, so if you want to invest or the same story, convertible notes plus tokens as a bonus. So it's easy and understandable for all the venture capitalists in Silicon Valley. And mostly it's a safe deal. So for 2 years you can ask about money, right? So, and you have a tokens. Like, for example, I have a lot of guys who, oh, Alex, can you do this like 100K and we give 100% bonus if they give us money. So I say convertible notes, and that's easy.
I'm not from Silicon Valley, I'm from Los Angeles, so I don't know if it's applicable, this question applicable to me, but at any rate, looking from the standpoint of investment, obviously a traditional way or more of a ICO way, a lot of people raised their hands when a question was, who is excited about ICOs? Everyone's like, ooh, right? But who is excited about ITOs? Who is excited about STOs? Who doesn't know what I'm talking about? Okay, so ITOs, I guess it's initial token offering, STO security token offering. So, and that's what I'm here for, to talk to you about, that the heydays of you trying to figure out any possible way of you determining that your utility token is far gone. So security token is probably the way, not the only way, but the way. And I think investors will start looking into this more and more and more, both the smart money as well as retail money. So that's how I see it.
I agree with you, Gene. And the trend I'm seeing right now is how Silicon Valley investors can invest in crypto projects as we do the traditional safes, not SAFs. And people are doing private token sales where the tokens stay private, or maybe they go Reg A+. But yeah, it's trending towards security tokens.
Yeah, I think we're still seeing the kind of emergence of the VC that can get into this. A lot of the traditional VCs, their LPs won't let them go into a straight ICO. They have to go for equity, hold the equity, and maybe get gifted coins on the side, but under the terms of their LPs, they can't go straight into the ICO. Obviously, there's some VCs getting around that. We see a lot of people in that space. And I think there will be more in the future there'll be better productized investment categories. That it's not just equity or ICO.
Yeah, thanks. So for my opinion, main idea here is risk management. So how do investors should take their portfolio? And what we're going to see, the market is developing very fast. I think that we will see like several platforms like Kickstarter in the next several months who are going to provide real high quality ICOs projects. Also from our point of view, we will provide such kind of services in our project. So our investor, our token holders will have a possibility to find really the good one.
Cool, thank you. I'm going to ask a very simple question, so which is very resonating with this audience. It's like, where are we now in terms of ICOs, regulation, and utility tokens? Maybe, Terence, you can start that answer?
Yeah, so utility tokens, as Eugene alluded to, sorry, Alex alluded to, I apologize, are tough. So utility tokens are supposed to be exchangeable for a good or service and not be a security. And in the US, now that we have people who we had dinner with at Thanksgiving and Christmas last year buying, right, these tokens and ICOs, the SEC is taking a keen interest in making sure US retail investors are not left holding bags and not being dumped on with disclosures that are inadequate, misleading, or contain material omissions. So all those things make utility tokens that are not securities really tough. So if you're doing a utility token and you're selling to US investors, you should probably assume you are doing a security and just comply with US securities laws. It's probably a lot easier.
Cool. Anybody else, Alex?
So what I know right now, a lot of conversation and plans to do security exchange platforms. So I know New York home family offices create something really big because they buy a lot of security tokens right now and need to exchange to something. And I have conversations this morning. You cannot tell the company name, but they also prepare all the legal stuff to prepare the exchange, because it's next level here in America to do special exchanges for security tokens. So that's a logical next big shift for the industry.
Absolutely. So in next exactly 10 minutes, we'll open audience questions. So whoever has burning question, just 9 minutes from now, exactly. So the next question to the panel is, so when I was at Wall Street in 2009, all my colleagues from my business school actually would go for trading or algorithm. And I was a dumb guy, so I just based something on news, where Bank of America would actually go from 39 to 31 in less than 40 minutes. And this trend really I followed, and I was basically just seeing what's going on in the industry at that particular second, and I would trade a lot of my 50 stock which I had. So why that's relevant, that question goes to the panel. How has the market changed in last few weeks in regards to the investing? If you guys can, when I say few weeks means the last more than 10 weeks in this year. Yeah.
So my sense is the market's been going down, right? And Bitcoin dominance, meaning Bitcoin as a percentage of the total cryptocurrency market cap, has gone up from about low 30-some% to like 40-some%. And if you look at where Bitcoin was a year ago before ICOs really took off, it was about 84%. So Bitcoin is doing okay. ICOs and non-Bitcoin coins are not doing as well as a group. Part of that might be because of SEC and other regulatory scrutiny around the world. Part of it might be there's a rumor that the folks at EOS dumped a lot of Ether onto the market, and also the Mt. Gox trustee had dumped a lot of coins onto the market in a way that a lot of investors, I have no comment, but other investors didn't like and thought moved the market down unnecessarily.
Yeah, Alex.
Well, I think it's the story of centralization of decentralized world. So we're still, even though we believe that it's a decentralized, unfortunately, it's still centralized. So I don't know if you've seen the presentation, 80% of mining done in China, how is it not centralized? So when we see the dumping of Bitcoin in the market and that leads to the free fall of it, how is it not centralized? So the idea of decentralization is good, but I think it's not here yet. In terms of investing is concerned, well, I'm personally been very heavy before. I have unloaded a lot of positions around December. I'm buying back in, but in small quantities. And again, depending on what's happening with Ethereum and many other major coin holders dumping the coins, it tells something. Even though we think, well, we don't need normal currencies like US dollars, but guess what? Everybody's trying to convert it to US dollar. So essentially, I think from the standpoint of where we personally invest as well as a fund, and now I'm wearing the head of this startup company, is basically looking at the use case of a project rather than the idea, but the actual use case. And that's why we believe the new wave of ITOs, STOs would be the solution to remove all of this junk out of the market and bring the true value of a blockchain as a technology.
Yeah. Anyone else here? Please.
Yeah, I think we're kind of living in the hangover of the party last year. It was pretty easy to do an ICO last year and watch it rocket up on the back of Bitcoin going up. So everything, you know, all boats rose in the tide. And I think now that we've had a correction, people are actually starting to do a bit more due diligence on what they're going into and asking more questions. So I think it's a better time. You know, I know there's a lot of people underwater on investments they've made, but actually I think it's taking some of the pure scams out of the market because people are having time to look at them and do more due diligence.
Yeah, I agree. Everybody's waiting next big party, next big wave. It will be. It's just a lot of things that should come in one. And what we see is like from one side is like global politics, like G20, they make negotiations and so on. And the other way, what Asia is, I have just arrived from Singapore, and they have a really strong vision of how the market will gonna be driven. So this altogether will come. I think that next 3 months we will see this next party. If we will not see this next big party, we will have more headache. But September for sure will be a big wave.
Beautiful. Alex?
Yeah, so I look for like small perspective. Do you guys realize what happened with Telegram ICO? So that's actually indicator. Telegram, they accept only fiat, and they probably will reach 2 billion hard cap. They bring to this market about 30% of the value in fiat. So, and all the crypto funds, so if we talk in perspective 10 weeks ago, yes, right? How many of you see, oh, I have a location for Telegram, or as if before, so on the early stage when they sell for 38 cents, everyone looking for allocation. Do you have a location? Do you have a location? No. Who has a location? But now, on the stage A lot of allocation, you can buy everyone, so, but price go up. But the funds, the crypto funds, hedge funds, they participate in these deals. So the big guys come with the Pavel Durov, and the next big thing, so what actually happens. So keep an eye on it. So I'm not asking you to buy these tokens, right? Yeah. So I'm not advisor, so I'm not connected. I just analyze what's going on. And next, when they go to public sale, it will be madness. You will see it. and doesn't so concerned about the because Bitcoin up and down. So people right now they buying most of the. So I don't buy these tokens because I'm a bad investor. So actually I'm not an investor. So but you will see how it's going on and how with the model to sell and how they sell, because Pavel Durov is scared about the control. It's a story from Russia, because Russia is very controlled country. So Pavel Durov, he actually lost his company in Russia, VKontakte. It was one of the leading social network, and he was kicked out from his company because it's a long story. But at the same time, he has an experience, and what he did, he just. You can participate in my ICO, but you can invest only 20 million. That's how he decentralized manually, without any technologies, right? So, and next, on the stage A, yes, people have allocations. Maybe it will be like a secondary market for the ICO tokens or whatever. So people think about, but it's huge. It's about 2 billion and up. And of course, it's still in dollars. Because how much?
Thank you. So we have a final question and then audience question. The question is, what is the asset-backed token and why is gaining popularity at this moment?
I think it's right in my wheelhouse. We truly believe in asset-backed tokens, or essentially security tokens, because coming from the traditional space where you buy an equity or you can basically do the debt structure, and now going into this very interesting world of tokens and coins. And before I didn't really know the difference, what's the token and what's the coin. Now I do. Now I believe there is a perfect opportunity for a hybrid version where traditional money can essentially wrap in the token issue that would give investors two things. Number one, a participation in equity, and two, an opportunity for the exit. So essentially removing the fear of investors of keeping money too long in the projects. Sometimes you can't even get the money back because the project may go in a direction that you don't want that to go. So that also gives the issuers of the token an opportunity to attract right investors because they stand behind what they sell, essentially the assets of the token that they try to back by. So to me, it's a perfect combination of a traditional way of raising funds as well as providing a peace of mind, as well as a new way of embracing the technology, as well as the new form of the money, if you will. I really like that MOIP, money over IP. That's really cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's the time all we have. One fun fact for every panelist. Do you own cryptocurrency, yes or no? Can we start with Alex? Okay.
Say yes,
okay.
all together.
Okay, please pass on the mic, please.
Of course.
Thank you.
Yes, but some.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, of course, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and a lot of different.
Okay, so full disclosure, I did a big mistake of buying Bitcoin at $13 in 2013. Audience questions, please. Awesome. Person mic up.
So you hear a lot about SAFT, and everybody's talking about SAFT, and SAFT is the way to go to. But when I'm talking to people, I haven't met a lot of people that are doing SAFT investments. So is that common? Are investors buying into SAFT or not? And SAFT-E, is that also picking up, or is there any value in SAFT-E, which is the equity side?
Thank you for asking a short question. Love it.
You're welcome.
So I actually am in a deal with a lot of top VCs because I had backed a very loyal founder who got me in the deal, and we're still working on the docs. We committed to that deal a while ago, and they have several top lawyers working on it. So it's a great question. I'd love to know the answer because it seems like we may not be doing the SAF because that's already been out there, used a lot. The deal I'm in is a totally private token sale for accredited investors and VCs and so forth. So it'll never go public, I think, because that's not the intent. But
I'm not providing any legal advice, full disclosure. But effectively, SAFT is not effective as it used to be. We don't know what the outcome will be, the final outcome, but essentially a lot of people stopped talking or presenting SAFT effectively. So SAFT is a different version of essentially futures, if we talk about the financial instrument. So just a quick promo, Token IQ effectively attempting to replace the SAFT with a technology that would allow the futures to be part of a blockchain, because our unique ability to determine that the intuitiveness of a smart contract can govern its transferability, which effectively allowing us to create many financial instruments such as options, futures, derivatives, and we're working on the bonds. So that would allow issuers to essentially use our platform to issue a security token without the need of a SAFT. I'm not saying you don't need a legal documents to support it. You do, but not necessarily a SAFT.
Thank you, guys. Please ask, right here. Please ask us short questions so you can get a long answer.
Okay, so from another conference, I learned that SEC has already audited 200 companies, and they're going to go after 80% of companies that claim they're utility token, but they're actually security tokens because they raise funds on ICO. Okay, so my question from investor side, what if the investor invested in pre-sale or private sale, and then the company goes ICO, and then the SEC audits the company, does the investor get the money back? Okay, from the ICO side, there are platforms for ICO platforms for ICO to launch their ICO. So those ICO that launch their ICO on the ICO platform, are they considered security token? Would they get? Do they have to be compliant with SEC? Thank you.
I guess I'll take it as the former lawyer on the panel. So investors who participated in the pre-sale and touted, right, promoted, told everybody on Twitter, whatever, or Telegram, hey, this great token you should buy, while they're dumping, and they failed to disclose, they own the token, but many of us did that. The problem is many of us did not disclose the percentage or amount. And I was in the audience, just like you folks, at Stanford a few weeks ago, where someone from the SEC, not the person who spoke this morning, someone less assertive, frankly, but she said the touting rules, which I need to dig into, require you to disclose the amount or the percentage of tokens you own. So you can't just disclose that, oh, I own B token and you should buy it, it's awesome. So the whole problem is the US SEC cares about what? Dumping on US retail and Main Street investors. Can't do that without proper disclosure, like when Dropbox has their S1, right? And they're going IPO, you can, if you wanted to, you could pull a Michael Burry from The Big Short and read the entire prospectus, ask questions, whatever. But yeah, it's because of lack of proper disclosure that they're getting in trouble.
Thank you. Gentlemen?
Hi, I'm Nobody. And my question is, for us nobodies, what's the best way to invest into ICOs instead of waiting for them to go on a public sale? And we all know that the best companies don't sell their tokens publicly. It's private, closed parties. So my question is, what's the best way for me to go into it? and get the tokens from the good companies. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think the only thing I'll say, just on the back of the last question, if you're being gifted tokens in order to promote an ICO, that is outright banned now. So the SEC has already put that out there. But to your question, I mean, one of the things you've got to remember about going in at pre the public offering is a lot of the ICOs now, and I think it's a good thing, will force you to lock in. And so you're under different rules if you're getting into that pre-ICO space. So if you can get in on these things, a lot of them are locking, have a 1 year or 2 year lock-in period, which I think is a good thing. But just be wary of that.
We have 2 minutes, so we can just micro answer.
Yeah. So actually, as I understood right, what you really need to check is escrow of the project. Do they have it or not? Actually, for my opinion, I will not invest in the project that don't have an escrow. One point. And next point, just try to communicate directly with the team, with founders, because they are all of them on such kind of events. And this is the best way just to see really what kind of persons are they.
Alex.
Hello. So this week I see one amazing thing. The company, I cannot say the name because for many reasons, they already so they are not public, so an ICO. They will do an ICO, and they already raised 60 million just from family and friends. So it depends. So who is your friends?
So you can evaluate your friends now.
If your friends are like our richest families in America, it's not a problem, right? Or definitely it's a filter. No, my opinion, not anyone deserves the money. You should find, it's like a filter. You can or you cannot. Definitely you need to find people who know the people, or find the rich families and explain them, or make build a really good quality of connection. And one day, if you run your own ICO or whatever, you just have a lunch with them, explain on a napkin what you actually do, without any legal work, paperwork, and everything. If they trust you, they like your idea, they will give you money personally to you, or not.
Yeah. Thank you. We have 20 seconds. So the last final question is, what have I and the team learned from Silicon Valley? I'm going to start with me. What I learned in last decade in Silicon Valley is a mindset. That's all I learned. What is your mindset? What is your mindset today? And what's your mindset going to do tomorrow? And what you learn and what you perceive. And you're very, very dedicated and very sincere to not to anybody else, but to yourself. So do that self-awareness exercise and talk to yourself at least 5 minutes a day, to know who you are, what you want to do, and just keep digging that question. Be self-aware of what you're doing, and all answers will come through. Let's go to a quick answer to the gentleman.
Yes, thanks. So main point for me is to be more focused on developing product and come closer with our clients to communicate.
In short, ship it. Ship the product. Go ahead.
Yeah, focus. Just treat it like investing in straight equity. Focus on the product. What are the milestones? Who are the team?
Thank you.
Learn much faster. That means whatever you take away from today, explain to your spouse, your friends, whatever. You can write about it.
Well, 1 second pause. So learn faster. So come to my program, Exponential Failure. You learn in 5 days. Okay.
I would say connections. So get connected, get wired, network. I think that's going to help a lot.
Close the deals. Always close the deals, because cookies for closers.
Beautiful. Can we help give a round of applause to all my team, please? Get picture.
Thank you. Take a picture. Great. Thank you to the panel for great discussion. Thank you, Vince. And thank you to many of our panelists who have been here for 2 days. And again, thank you to our general sponsor, Cryptocurrencies, who helped make this event possible. We now have a session with Chance Stu, who you heard from earlier today, and she is going to talk about landscape trends for 2018 for the investing climate for ICOs. You heard earlier, you saw her when she voted on the team of investors, her passion for investing in ICOs. We are right on track, and we will continue. We end about 5:20 today. As I said earlier, the show hall closes at 4, but you could still keep networking outside. Yeah. It's right here. Just push the green button. Okay. There's a mic. You have a mic.
Okay, that's great. Okay, thanks for coming to my speak. Hope I can share something that I learned from practice to be helpful for the projects that are looking to do ICOs and or some investors like new journalist space looking at ICO projects. Before my talk, I have a brief introduction myself. I'm a founding partner at Coefficient Ventures, Chance Du. Is my kind of bio. We're investor of Filecoin, Radar Network, OpenZippling, 0x, Sounder Token. I think people that are involved in this space a long longer time probably know those projects. I personally also joined 3 projects as a advisory board. The first, as Tomo Chen, I'm the first investor and advisor for TomoCoin, founded by the previous founder of LIM, NEM, and which right now is top 15 cryptocurrency in the core market cap. And also I'm helping Filecoin to expand to their Asian market, helping them collect with the miners and the communities and developers involved and engaged with Filecoin. And also, I joined cryptocurrency space since 2017 January. So I have 1 year and 3 months experience, very deep experience in the space. Before that, I was an angel investor in AI machine learning, and before that, I was started a company back in 2011 in China and get acquired in 2015. Coefficient is a crypto fund that we only invest in blockchain. We invest in 80% in tokens and 20% in equity. Those are parts of our portfolios. We have invested in 25 token projects so far. There's more and more, a few equity projects portfolio coming in this month. Also, we're launching an incubator called Coefficient X. We're choosing less than 10 projects per year to deeply involve and help and advising the collect with best resources and also investing in those portfolios. Okay, so today my topic is about how crypto funds look at ICO projects and like what's the most important facts that they're looking at for projects. Also, I will tell you what's the best strategy to raise funding in this bear market in right now. Okay, so the first thing I will talk about is the infrastructure application. This is actually a big difference in terms of different funds. We have, in crypto funds, we have also traditional venture funds that invest in the tokens. So basically they have different theses, depends on, which their LPs or the fund managers. So some funds are focused on infrastructure because they think right now is the best timing for infrastructure projects. But some funds that will be more brave to look at application level projects, especially for venture funds that break into the blockchain space because they don't have a lot of industry resources. They know the industry very well, so they're looking more actively in the application levels. So regarding, I actually today, in this morning, a lot of people talk to me. Probably 90% are application level projects. Either like the existing established company, they're looking to raise money through ICOs. So basically, they think maybe in blockchain we plus some blockchain things there, and it's better or either to raise money. So they're looking to tokenize or maybe apply blockchain technology in their existing startup. Those we looking at as application level projects. And a other kind of application level projects, we will say it's like a blockchain application. What it means is it's never existed before, those model, like a prediction market, like Augur. So the blockchain technology empower those kind of application possible and have those kind of applications. And also like Steemit is a content ecosystem compared with media. So it's like a blogger, a new kind of blogger. You basically write your content and you get your token and or rewards. It's kind of like use token to incentive those content creators. So it's born as a blockchain application. So I think I treat that application is different from using the existing business to apply blockchain technology. So our fund, Coefficient, we're more focused on the infrastructure projects in blockchain ecosystem from now. But I think this space is changing very fast. So like last year, September, actually, we only look at infrastructures. But when one day in October, I saw the people starting to using the Steemit very seriously. I started to looking at application level in very blockchain applications. That's why we invested in a project called Tari, which they built a new digital assets protocols. Also, they're gonna build the first step on top of it. That's why we made this first investments that in application level blockchain ecosystem. Okay, so if you're doing a ICO, you can define yourself. Why that matters to your ICO? Because you want to talk with the right investors, right funds. If your application level project, you're talking with the funds that only look at infrastructure, probably it's not gonna work out. But it's good. It's always good that you could try. And also I think why people think right now is the right timing for infrastructure. As you can see right now, even the top one public chain Ethereum is get stuck just because one DApp, which is Cryptocurrencies, that makes it impossible to run top of a lot of big business. So that we can see that now the whole industry, we need the scalability solutions. We also need the security, make this whole network more secure, more decentralized. So that's why right now we think from now on to maybe 1 or 2 years, I think it's the right timing for building the infrastructure for blockchain. But I definitely recommend all the people starting to look at space seriously and to prepare. Like before, when I all in blockchain create this crypto fund, actually I spent almost 1 year to deep learn and be prepared, understand it first, and launch this token fund. I think if you just know this space for 3 or 2 months, I don't think you can come up with some very great idea that could make your SEOs very successful. Be prepared and understand the pinpoint of this industry. There's tons of opportunities in this industry, either in infrastructure or in application. Even you really want to do an application with your own existing business, then you also have to understand deeply why you need blockchain. If you didn't understand deeply, I don't think you can for your investors. Especially great investors. Okay, that's why I think that's very important to all the people know how we look at. But definitely today's point just represent my point of view, not represent every funds. So the first one is so I took the first thing because I think that means timing. What is the right timing? So I think for venture capital investing or crypto fund investing, blockchain investing actually is the same. Timing is the most important thing, I think. Like Facebook is not coming from the early when like it's not like MySpace is earlier than Facebook, but Facebook become the first top social media. So that's just because that our timing, the infrastructure is ready, and the mass adoption, the potential is ready. So there's a app that coming out that timing, then it's grows very fast. And the second I want to mention is the team still matters. No matter which sector you are in, either you are in AI, artificial intelligence, or blockchain, all the sectors, that team still matters. I think that's also, except the timing, our coefficient and myself do investments, I'm very focused on the team members. If you are infrastructure blockchain projects, if your team member don't have very strong blockchain like developers or have people like involved in the space few years, long time, I don't think you can come up with a very good infrastructure idea, or you have the ability to create that. So we're always looking at team members where different go through all the backgrounds, how and when they involved in the blockchain industry, and what he has done so far. So we're specifically looking for people that involve some projects before, that is very good projects. Also, I think a lot of thing is about the team, how many engineers this team have. Because if you don't have technical people or developers, I cannot help you. I cannot help you, recruiting or help you code. But for us, where we have a whole industry and global resources, we can help you in terms of business side, operation side, give you the best resource partnerships, investors, relations, all this stuff. But I cannot give you the developers. So that's why I mentioned here, for the team blockchain projects, I look at the operation team is a plus. If you're a team that have a strong operations background, it's a plus. But if you don't have, we're still gonna look at you and have the potential view. When we invest in Tomocoin, their team have no business people, but we are good at it. So we give them all the resources, but they have 800 engineer back in the 90s to join that team. So we're very excited. That's why we make this early investments. Okay, let's. The hard time matters. So ICOs the past year in the bond market, that's the craziest year, I think. The Filecoin raised 257 million, and definitely we'll have Tezos raised 230 million. Those big projects turns out the giants blockchain projects in this space. But I think they raise that money, they have their foundations to raise those money. You cannot look at, okay, they raise like 200 million, then I will want to raise 200 million. So Tezos and Filecoin, they're in the space for about 3 and 4 years. They build a protocol and have a very strong team and very innovative ideas in this space that gives them foundations to convince the investors. And also definitely they're born in they catch up a very good timing, which is a bull market. It's just the craziest timing last year in July or August that make it happen. If you look at right now, not much projects looking to raise such a big amount of money, except I think Telegram. They raised 800 million, but they also have 200 million users. So I didn't say that like big cap is not bad, but when you want to raise a big cap, you want to look at yourself. Does your team strong enough to have that cap? Do you actually lead that money? We can tell that as for Tezos or Filecoin, they are very fundamental infrastructures. You need a lot of big funds like to build the whole ecosystem. That's why they need this big funds. But if you're just applications or solve specific problems, I don't think you need that amount of money. Okay, so this industry actually, the last year, a lot of people, investors, worry about the hypes. They think it's a bubble, right? You raised like 200 million within a few minutes. That's gonna crash. I said to them, don't worry, the market gonna correct itself. It's very quickly. So start from October because of China ban. So the whole market kind of crashed a little bit, and the hard cap immediately down a lot. So most ICOs actually raised around 30 million to 40 million from last year October to this year February. So the cap that really above 40 million. We will take a look. If the team is very strong, we will take a look. But if it's not, we're gonna immediately pass it because just no reason you need that money. So I think, but now the market is even bad than before. So yeah, still we have like Telegram raised 800 million, but they do have really strong user base, and also all the crypto people use Telegram. That's why they can have this chance to raise this massive round. I will talk about this projects we invest as an example. So they build the infrastructure. Basically, is a public chain, and the founder have a very good tractions. And but he only raised 8.5 million in last year. He started raising ICO last year. It turns out a big success, but big even in the bear market because he raised a very reasonable amount of money, and to build a solve a biggest problem, which is scalability for Ethereum. So this year, I recommend projects that set up a cap around 10 million, maybe or less. But if you really need more, if you could convince people, then you can set up more. But I definitely think this year the investors, the funds, gonna more favor the lower cap projects. First of all, you really don't need that money to prove because a lot of projects just have team, they don't have demo, they don't have testnet. You basically just need a few million to survive 1 or 2 years to prove people you actually could deliver. For traditional venture capital perspective, for a typical seed round is like 2 million. I think that's enough. But in this space, you need to spend a lot of legal stuff. I think it's good to a little bit higher than the traditional seed round. So the timing, the team, the hard cap, the terms. So that's the third thing that people are looking at. I think all the things that apply to all the ICO projects, not just for infrastructures. Even we're only maybe focused on the infrastructure, but I think all these things apply to all the ICO projects. The fourth thing is the lockup. So every ICO projects, you have to set up your lockup period. Are you gonna lock up tokens, or you gonna have vesting schedules? It depends on the project itself. Also, it depends on the jurisdiction of the compliance issues. But I would say in investor perspective, for crypto funds or crypto investors specifically, they're looking to maybe take their principal out if possible. So I think it could unlock part of them at the beginning, but you can lock off some part of it. And also some projects is really confident by their projects, so they unlock all of them, like Tomocoin. They didn't lock us anything, but we kept it and hold it because we truly believe this thing. Because I think why lockup is very important for crypto investors, because compete with the traditional equity investments. Crypto fund actually, the killer feature is the liquidity. Think about the equity. Actually, you usually have to wait for 7 years in order to exit. But tokens, it will take you like few months or 1 year, 2 years to exit. So if you lock investors like 4 or 5 years, they will think it makes no sense to do a token. Why not just equity? So I think since we're doing ICO or token projects, we definitely have to give this investor some upside of the structure. But also, I also think it's good to have a good locking period to attract those long-term investors to involved in your projects. It's also good. Okay, so those 4 basically are 4 important things that we're looking at ICO projects, no matter what kind of projects you are. For a lot of people here, I think more application projects, I think one thing that we're looking at is also the traction. Since you're applications, so you cannot just convince me based on your team because I need to see the deliver. It's more like traditional startups. If you want to build something that is blockchain, make it more efficient, you have to get your test users, like a lot for early adopters use it and prove this traction. I think that's much stronger to convince investors. And you have team that really understand blockchain well. That also team member that really understand the industry well. That make it possible to you actually could build a good application for blockchain. So next thing I want to talk about in this year, what's the trend of token investing and what we should take look at in this space. So I think in this whole year, because of the market's downside, and so I think the quality of this the project of the year is gonna increase a lot, because right now we can tell that a lot of projects actually a little bit harder for them to raise money. Even like 2 or 3 months ago, even for application projects, it's very easy to raise money. If they do ICO, public, they have good marketing strategy, build a very good large Telegram community groups. They could raise 20 or 30 million very easily. I mean, it's in a bull market last year, but now it's in a bear market. Then I think it's gonna make it much harder for those projects to raise money. So, but still, the good projects could successfully raise money. But I think you really need to think through your whole structure. So I think this year, the whole picture of the quality of projects is gonna increase. Okay, second, I think this year, more and more traditional VCs gonna join this race to look at blockchain space. I recommend application projects, talk with those VCs that looking at blockchains, maybe SaaS, focused VCs. Then if you're a SaaS company doing application level blockchain projects, I think it's very ideal to talk with them because they understand industry very well. Also, they're looking at blockchain. So I think it's a very good match for you guys to talk about. So I think in this year, I think China is always move a little bit ahead of the Valley. In China, almost, I think probably 70% of VCs join blockchain ICO investing now. They create a WeChat group, like thousands of WeChat group within 1 week. That's exchange ideas, we investing in tokens. They're very eager to learn. I think that's gonna have similar happen in the worldwide too, in the Valley, in the Europe, in the Asian other part as well. The third is, I think, a lot of very important thing for token project is you need to get your token listed. If your token don't have liquidity, it's gonna have huge problems. So exchanges is always the most important thing for your projects. But I really don't like how it works right now, the exchanges. They charge its projects millions just to get listed. I really don't think that's the future of the blockchain. So we will see actually this year, start with few exchanges, the decentralized exchange is coming. Or exchange like decentralized exchange called IDEX, I'm using a lot. It's very interesting to say actually they have a lot of coin value, the trading value is larger than the centralized exchange now. So we can see decentralized exchange is coming. So for you guys don't know what is decentralized exchange, so basically you trade within your own wallet, and your token get listed without any fee. They can list every tokens, and so they're not type of thing that charge you tons of money to get listed. So I think if the blockchain really gonna reinvent the whole internet, then we need those such stuff that get listed a whole bunch of like thousands, hundreds, thousands tokens come out every day. Then which token's gonna survive? It's gonna be who deliver the best product. So I think don't worry about the exchange issues. If you're doing your tokens, that is hard to get into centralized exchange. I think decentralized exchange is still working. It is also working, so don't afraid of that. The fourth trend in this year, I could say, is like more and more mainstream tenants starting to join this blockchain waves. I saw a lot of people like from major tech companies. They have very higher position, maybe VP of engineer. They're starting to join this revolution, starting to build amazing projects. So I still think right now we're in very early stage of blockchain. I'm glad all you guys starting to look at space seriously and starting to do something here. What I mentioned before that we're looking at most in infrastructure, just for now, we didn't set up our strategy for a long time. I think this space can change within 6 months. Things could change very fast. So just be prepared, be ready when that comes to you. So I think those are 4 things I think I want to mention in this talk. And I think a lot of things that I want to mention is I think a lot of people maybe right now you guys have a existing business, but you saw this big technology waves. You're thinking about what I'm gonna do with this. A lot of people were the 2 ways. One, you're gonna apply blockchain to your existing projects. Second, forget about the first one. You'll either stop it or sell it. And totally to, new to learn this whole blockchain and found the problems exist in this industry and come up with ideas that could solve real problems in industry, then that also works. So depends on your stage. You can think either way. Like the project I'm looking at actually today is a Y Combinator new project called BIN. I look at the founder's background, actually don't have much blockchain experience. They're also a traditional software startup, I think, before. But I think they learned this industry very well. They come up with this like a mobile app that you could trade your tokens and integrate with the AI bots that could answer questions through this trading mobile app. That's really, really amazing. Because for those people that have a lot of startups, software building experience, you actually understand how to build a great product or user experience. That's actually a lot of great blockchain projects don't have right now. So if you are deep into this industry for a few months, you find this big problem in this industry and have to solve it and use your past experience in software development or product building. I think that also could work out. The way that you totally forget about what you do right now, but you really want to join this blockchain wave, then you go to learn and very deeply understand it. And then that also could come up with very great idea and great projects. So I think blockchain is really democratized technology wave that everybody actually could join and think about how I can contribute or benefit from this technology wave. Thank you. This is my speech. I'm open to some questions from audience. Any questions?
Hi, everyone. I'm Elimar with SeattleBitcoin.com. We're an educational platform based in Seattle. And I have heard your talking about investing and all this, but what are we doing for the ecosystem for education? Because this is key for adoption. Are you interested in, have you been invested in a project like where is dedicated for education, for the regular person to know how to download a wallet, what a blockchain is, how do I start in this and being part of this world, crypto world?
Yeah, actually, blockchain education actually is one of the most important direction we're looking at, because especially for developer education. So for right now, the whole industry needs developers. All the projects, they need to hire developers, but there is a very giant gap with those tenants, because the mainstream like Google or Facebook or Uber, those engineers still kind of very slow to move into space. So it's still very hard, even for Filecoin, those like massive funded startup and very, all-star teams. Even for them, it's very hard for them to hire a very good engineer. So if you're building a blockchain and online education platform that focuses on education the new developers, it's gonna be amazing. Actually, we're specifically looking at those kind of projects to fund them, because it's just so important to this whole ecosystem.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have questions. You mentioned about China. China has a big market for Bitcoin mining and also for the ICO funding. But then, just like if you read the news, just last year, China has banned on the Bitcoin and also has freezed the ICOs. I mean, like 60 listing, for the ICOs are under investigation. And even Singapore has also voiced their concerns about the list of the ICOs, which is related to some, illegal activities, or because of it's raising a large money in a short time, and also they were skeptical, and also, the authorities are also concerned about the money laundering activities. So what are your viewpoints about this?
Okay, so first of all, China didn't ban Bitcoin. They just banned the issue public ICOs for public. So also, they actually very incentive those technology building behind blockchain. But definitely, we see a massive moving out of China, of the Chinese projects. Chinese blockchain entrepreneurs moving out everywhere. They come to US, they come to Japan, they go to Europe. Actually, for me, it's a good thing, actually, for Chinese entrepreneurs. Because before, for the traditional internet entrepreneurship, they only need to focus on China markets and they can successful. But right now, they force them have to move overseas. So actually, it's good for Chinese entrepreneurs to go to global and join this global competition of blockchain. And I personally think if China didn't deal with correctly in this wave, I think it's gonna lose a lot of big opportunity next decades. We still see the Silicon Valley still kind of attract the best talent in the blockchain space. But also, I thought the decentralization of this whole industry, actually, a lot of people, they just go to everywhere globally, like distributed teams. It's very common for blockchain projects to actually have a distributed teams over the world. So it's okay for remote work in this new kind of startup thing. So I definitely think that's not a big issue for one country to ban this. It cannot stop this revolution. Thank you.
Great. Well, let's give a round of applause. Thank you to the great panel. Thank you. Thank you. And next, Dennis O'Connell, who you heard from earlier yesterday, a blockchain consultant. And I wanted to mention that while we are closing the exhibit hall now, we have moved tables and chairs. We're in the process of doing that outside. However, we have had people ask and express interest in meeting after the event for further networking in a bar. So there are 2 bars in the hotel. We're looking into it now to meet. The nice one is called The View. It's on the 39th floor with a great view. It's a very large bar. We would have a no-host bar since we don't have a host who's going to buy drinks for everybody, but we hope you will join us. So don't leave. I will announce at the next break if we can go to The View, and then everybody, when we're done at 5:20, can go as a group up to the top of The View and continue the party up there. They have drinks and food. So we'll keep you posted.
Good afternoon, and thank you, everyone. So a little bit about myself. My name is Dennis O'Connell. I'm a global blockchain consultant, and I want to start off with a quick disclaimer. The opinions I'm about to express, my views, are merely my own personal views. They are not representative of any companies I might consult for, and they're certainly not to be construed as any sort of investment advice or any solicitation. And as a full disclosure, of course, I do own cryptocurrencies. So I wanted to do something special today. For those of you who may or may not know, I'm actually also in the Forbes Technology Council along with Theodore over there. And if you're ever invited, I do recommend joining. It is an incredible group of top technologists across the country, and they work at every level from the low end to the top end. So what am I here to talk about? Well, I've been learning a lot, like you have the last couple of days, on blockchain, and what I do on a day-to-day basis, both in my day job and for my company, Ascension Protocol, which is both a fund advisory and also a product venture space based out of Manhattan, is dealing with a lot on the user side, the enterprise side. And if you were here yesterday, you might have seen me talk about, blockchain enterprise. What does this mean? What look like, and why is it important? And so today I'm going to share with you my Forbes article on this. It's coming out, and you can check it in the next 6 to 8 weeks. It's through the editing process, and it's been vetted by Forbes, so I'm very excited for that. And I wanted to share that with you because I feel it's important that as you go through the ICO process, you see the larger picture at hand, and you see what's happening from the perspective of enterprise clients and adopters. A lot of times we get so excited about the ICO opportunities, we get excited about the blockchains, but we also have to keep perspective on the users. And sometimes not all the users are small entities. Sometimes the users are large corporations or potentially mid-sized corporations, and that's what I think we could talk about today. A little bit of background on me. I found myself doing blockchain consulting. I led a team doing an R3 Corda platform at one of the global banks I consulted for, and we won the Global Innovation Fair, proving out that you could do a distributed ledger technology using Corda for intercompany trades, and we were very successful. We were so successful that after the Innovation Fair, I found myself talking to enterprise stakeholders of Fortune 10, Fortune 100 companies because they saw the results and they were curious of how we did it, what lessons we learned. And out of that came my consulting opportunity to give stakeholders of these large enterprises how they view cryptocurrencies, how they view adoption, and what they should be looking for. Now, those conversations came these inequalities, came these themes that keep coming up and up again. And so today, by you listening to this, the value that I'm giving you is my perspective, what I deal with on a day-to-day basis. And if you can anticipate how your product is going to be viewed or adopted, then you can react and you can look proactive and ultimately help deliver value to both your clients, big and small. So without further ado, let's get into it. I am going to be giving you a concise presentation because I'm sure you might have some questions on enterprise blockchain. There's some spirited debates that could have and hopefully open up so we have more of a dialogue today. So what are the three big ones? Well, the first one is clearly no surprise, and I'm not going to spend too much time on it because, frankly, I've learned a tremendous amount, especially from our last speaker. But clearly, it's examining the investments and funding in unregulated markets, and the perspective we're going to look at is from that of an enterprise adopter, not necessarily from the people in the company raising the ICO, but how enterprise will look at facilitating someone else's coin. The next inequality I will talk about is understanding the potential of dApps over their platforms. And what I mean by that is that a lot of times we talk about either tokens, which are built on Ethereum, or we talk about really exciting blockchains themselves. But really what we need to see will really change the tide for enterprise is the adoption of and growth of these ecosystems that really smart people have built around us. And we're going to look into how dApps themselves have not yet transcended their platforms. So a lot of people know Ethereum, a lot of people know Neo, and these other great, fantastic platforms, but we're waiting to see that big bang with the dApps, and I do believe we'll be seeing that this year, especially with all the exciting ICO pitches we saw this week, as you can agree. The last one, and this one's a bit technical. I'm a technical person, so I thought for those of you who are technical might enjoy this, but if you're non-technical, you should be aware of this, and we'll get into why it matters. And that's called buying centralization and the challenges of consensus models. So we all love the blockchain. We all love, talking about how it's decentralization. Well, how do we actually get that? Well, we get that through consensus models. And consensus models can mean anything to, you guys know it, proof of work, proof of stake, these different approaches, Byzantine general approaches, POET, proof of estimated time, all these things. And they might seem technical, but we'll talk about why enterprises actually view that as a bigger deal than you might, and that's why platforms like Hyperledger and R3 Corda have effectively thrown them out the window. And so that's important for you to see as well. Okay, so let's get into it. So our first one, inequality of obligation. And again, this one I'm going to go through pretty fast because everyone here fundamentally knows it. There's people in this room who could speak to it far better than me. Effectively, inequality of obligation is, the ongoing debate, you saw it today, earlier with SEC, of investors who are able to access early stage ventures, enjoy liquidity, enjoy access, but also are not given any sort of fiduciary duties to their raisers, are not able to see how that money's spent, and all sorts of those problems. And again, we've seen that. The solution to that, of course, is increased regulation. It's being clear, and it's developing companies that have great ethos and have a very clear moral understanding of what they're doing, spend the money in a clear way, and also hold themselves to a higher standard. And we're going to see that with regulations, and we've talked about that. So let's move on to the two other ones, which are more interesting. Inequality of potential. So with the ICOs, we've seen some fantastic pitches, and we've seen some really interesting approaches. But what about from the enterprise level? What does that look like? How is someone running a Fortune 500 who sees a really great dApp or sees a really great blockchain, how do they view it? Well, there's a couple of things that they're worried about. They're worried about what if that network goes down? What if they end up having to support 5 or 6 different blockchains? And for example, you might have a really great idea, and your company might say, well, we're going to support our own blockchain as well.
Okay, we just found out we can reserve tables at the View restaurant, but they need approximately how many people there are because people are going there and they're reserving some. Raise your hand at 6 if you want to join us in the View restaurant. So keep them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Thank you.
All right. Is everyone still with me? I've never been interrupted before. This is new for me. Okay, so, but there's maybe my inequality potential. So what does this mean, inequality potential? Well, it means that we have these really great ecosystems, but the ecosystems are far more famous, they're far more prevalent, and people are thinking far lower at the protocol level in the hopes of building their own platforms. But there's a missed opportunity happening, and this is the missed opportunity that enterprise really wants. And what they want are dApps that build on these rich ecosystems that are built. And so that's how we'll get to overcoming this inequality of potential. Businesses, especially enterprise businesses, will react to blockchain when blockchains prove that they are their own ecosystem, their own thriving thing. Companies, ICOs that engage with other ICOs, they leverage each other's services. Companies that allow users to choose what blockchain underneath them. And there are blockchain as a services for sure. Why is that important? Why is that overcome that inequality? Well, it overcomes it because enterprises are going to look at that and go, this is a very strong ecosystem. If that particular dApp goes down, we can trust that that blockchain will still be used. And remember, companies are very nervous about supporting hundreds of tokens. If you're United Airlines or you're Delta, maybe you could use a dApp or you could use a platform like Stellar or Monero, which are really great, that support that, but maybe they don't want to support that because they're afraid of one of those networks going out or going down. So maybe they'll wait for it on the larger networks. They'll wait for an implementation on that. So maybe, and this is something I hear all the time, we'll wait for Ethereum to do it, or we'll wait for one of the major public blockchains to adopt it, or we'll wait for Hyperledger. That's another one I get. And again, it comes back to the same thing of a fear of adopting hundreds and hundreds of tokens to fill these one-purpose ventures. The decentralization is coming, but there's definitely going to be a hybrid period where companies who are more amicable to paying with different tokens are ultimately going to have to deal with the compliance and legal aspects of this. And so what will encourage them to adopt dApps is when dApp makers especially say, we're going to work with each other, we're going to interface each other's products, and we're going to focus not just on the protocol level, but we're going to focus on building rich mobile app experiences. And the blockchain that can build a really strong diversity of dApps will win out. And that's something that I think is the main point of this. For those of you who might not know, Mist is coming out. Does anyone know what Mist is? So Mist is the Ethereum dApp store. Ethereum has a major advantage because of that rich ecosystem. A company looking to do something with blockchain will find it way easier when their users are able to easily access that dApp, download it, and they know they can have strength on the Ethereum network, rather than perhaps relying on a singular company with its own blockchain and having them to support that. So that's inequality of potential. Next one is a bit more technical, but still very important and probably the heart of this discussion. Inequality of governance. So what is inequality of governance? Well, inequality of governance and consensus is how we make sure everything's unique, how we work in this decentralized, trustless environment. And so if you look at it from even just a layman's perspective, you have proof of work. Well, who wins with a proof of work? Those who have enough resources to buy the mining computers, to take advantage of low-cost electricity, and some might say that's capitalism. But they effectively, and this might be true for China, is you have 5% of the miners mining a majority of all the transactions. Well, what about proof of stake? Isn't Ethereum and others moving towards proof of stake? Or what about POET? Or the Byzantine general fault tolerance issues? Those don't require computational resources. No, but they do require collateral. And still, you're coming from the same paradigm with those who have heavy resources can unfairly impact these blockchains. So even if you are on Ethereum or you're on EOS or NEO, if you have a group of people that have a well-funded venture and they say, we want to be one of the minters in EOS, one of the 21 minters, well, why would you care if you're a dApp builder? Well, you should absolutely care, because what if those minters, despite all their governance rules, and I was at the EOS meeting and they're very clever and I'll refer you there, but what if? What if they decide to form their own pact, despite what EOS says? We know it's happened before. Same thing with mining. Mining is extremely slow. It doesn't scale very well, but even still, we all have seen the farms. Everyone's seen the pictures here, be it in Tacoma, be it in Montreal, or be it in China, these fast mining farms. Well, there's such a small percentage of them. How do newcomers deal with that? Even though the miners are not seeing the data, there's still some sort of centralization that happens. And so we want to make sure, from an enterprise perspective, that doesn't freak out large companies like Delta Airlines or SAP, for those who might control those systems, that there's not some sort of decentralization. And so how do we make it equal? Well, this one's a bit difficult, because we get really great benefits from proof of stake, proof of work, and all these other things. We make sure our transactions are unique, we protect against overtaking, and this is something that is going to have to be innovative. Now, who is completely ignoring this? Well, Hyperledger and Corda are completely ignoring it. And a lot of people say, oh, well, they're building their own private permission platform in DLT, distributed ledger technology, where there is no proof of work and proof of stake. If you understood this inequality in governance, you would understand why. In the enterprise, saying to someone, you could have all the benefits of blockchain, plus controlling your infrastructure, plus controlling your servers, and plus controlling who is on the permission network, and you also get all the wonderful cryptographic hashing, you get all the wonderful benefits of securing your data, you even could pick your own database, and you can control who you want to do with. It's very, antithetical to what we're here for today. We're all about decentralization and opening things up. Well, there's a reason for that, and it's called control. So when you're looking at your DApp and you're looking at your ICO, it's important to choose what platform you're on, because your end users and your potential enterprise adopters will also look at that too. And they'll go, well, do I have to hold coins if I want to be we love your DApp so much, we want to be on the network, we want to be at a deeper level, which has been asked, especially about Ethereum. Well, you have to have a server running, and you have to, dedicate all these resources. Well, I don't want that. I just want the security. Same thing with Ripple. Ripple is another coin that, is out there. It's absolutely taking Wall Street by storm. A lot of banks are looking at it, and they're considering it. And Ripple might be one of the first to markets because they're in the payment space. Because why? They make it super easy where there is no mining. So the inequality governance isn't there, but it matters quite a bit. So understanding some of these more technical aspects will help you choose what kind of DApp you build, what kind of blockchains you might choose, whether you want to spin your own, and more importantly, why things like Hyperledger and Corda exist. They exist because these major banks still want to control everything. And no one's really surprised by that. But what they should be surprised is that there are new innovations in blockchain coming, and that you should be keeping an eye towards it. Keep developing your DApp, keep holding your vision, but make sure you check on how your blockchains are affecting everything, how they're providing uniqueness, how they're making sure that blockchain can't be overcome. This governance aspect, the first one to get this one right in the public blockchain space will unlock the enterprise clients. That's a big one. They might like Ethereum, they might like Neo a lot, but if they don't have the confidence that there might be some sort of oligopoly around the mining, or they feel uncomfortable with being a participant on proof of stake, they might not even deal with it, and that would be a very sad reality indeed. So we want adoption. We don't want these closed systems, despite the initial build out of it. But everyone should look at Hyperledger and R3 Corda. They're fantastic people and fantastic developers, but look at what their innovations really were. Look at what they're doing. And if you do, you can pick. Now, what I have seen in the coming months is people approaching several blockchains, choosing their DApp to work on not just one blockchain, but 2 or 3. Should a forking instance occur, or should a better governance mechanism come out? And that diversity in architecture is critical. Blockchains can go down even before. We saw that Solidity contracts absolutely have a hacking risk, despite all their wonderful things. So we want to make sure that we're flexible, and that even though things look steady for now, blockchain is still very new, and things could change quite rapidly. And understanding these inequalities, such as the funding model, which we all knew today, such as the governance aspect of how we participate in these blockchains, and especially where the opportunity is, building dApps and having dApps that feed off each other and build a rich ecosystem and just don't live in their own silos, encourage enterprises to engage even more. So to recap, with smart regulation, investors can be assured that their investments are being appropriately used. We know that. As dApps continue to grow in complexity and influence relative to their blockchains, in other words, as dApps overcome their blockchains, when your family starts talking about not CryptoKitties, but a dApp that maybe is built on Ethereum or Neo or EOS, over talking about these blockchains, then you're going to see a tide change. Then you're going to see enterprise really engage. And then you're going to see dApps not only relying on ICOs, but relying on each other for services, which is really, truly what we need to see. A lot of dApps benefit from each other, and those dApps that provide security services or authentication services or payment services are looking for you. They're looking for you. They're looking for you to use their APIs, to engage in their blockchains and create an ecosystem of blockchains. And look for things like Mist, like the Ethereum dApp Store. You know, famously, the creators of Ethereum have said they have yet to see the exciting apps that they want, and Enterprise would agree. Enterprise likes the idea of blockchain, but again, they want to see the apps built on top of it, and that's what will get them to move. The last one, as innovation progresses, blockchain will continue to find new ways to balance network effect. And this is another point that I should talk about, allowing both new participants and legacy participants to benefit cohesively. So in addition to all of that, another thing that worries enterprises is what if they're too late to the party? What does that mean? Well, what if they picked the wrong blockchain, right? What if they went with EOS and EOS went in left when they want to go right? What if Ethereum went right when they meant to go left? So what does that mean? It means that those who join EOS late in the game in a proof of stake model, or those that join Ethereum, should have the same rights and benefits. And both of these blockchains are doing that. This is what they think about and talk about when you go to your meetings, is making sure that consortiums don't benefit the original participants over new participants, because enterprise will not allow that. They'll put them at strategic disadvantage, and then we get into a worse situation where no one wants to use each other's blockchain because they're too busy worried that they'll never have the same strategic advantage that they have ever again. And you've seen this before. One of the famous examples, and I'll allow you to research this, I was not personally involved, is JP Morgan Quorum. So JP Morgan was very much involved in R3, in the Hyperledger Consortium. And what did they do? Well, they participated and they decided to go in their own way in offering Quorum. Quorum is based off of Ethereum. It's a little different from what R3 is doing with the distributed ledger. But the point being is that they felt they could go their own way and offer their own platform. And now what we're seeing is a bit of a tension between the two, where we could have a more cohesive build-up. And again, this goes back to the point on ecosystem. So with that, I'll take some questions. Thank you so much. We got through the little interruption, and thank you for your time. Thanks, guys. I didn't tip him. How does dApp coexist with apps? Yeah. Yep. Well, I think Ethereum has a really great response, and all blockchains are doing this, which is they're becoming multi-language applications. So applications can still talk to each other through a RESTful interface or whatnot. Having more languages accessing these blockchains allow richer applications. So I understand the question. I just don't want to get too technical for the audience. My straight answer is it depends, right? Which is the ultimate cop-out, but it's true. It depends on what business they're doing. It depends on the data that they're working with. And it depends on how fast the users need a turnaround on their transaction, right? So if they can get by with, a regular transaction and they really don't need it to be on the blockchain that moment, you could have a traditional app that then talks to a server that then talks to a blockchain. You could also have an app that potentially could talk to several blockchains, as is common with BaaS. dApps have a completely reimagined stack, for those of you who are not familiar. The traditional stack was database, server, client, right? dApps have client, blockchain, and then maybe some blockchain service for their video content or files. And their information is literally stored in these blockchains. And Ethereum famously calls itself a world computer, same thing with EOS. So it really depends on how they need to talk to each other. It really depends on what they need to do with each other. I don't think, a person asked me, do you see databases going away? Do you see traditional elements, these old internet protocols that we worked on, messaging and REST or whatever, going away? And I don't think so. I think inevitably, especially enterprises, you're always going to have a hybrid architecture until there's enough of an ecosystem where there is no need to go on or off chain. And a lot of times you see even payment systems have on-chain operations, off-chain operations. Within their architecture, they have systems that talk to another. So if you want to talk to me after, I'll go further in depth and more technical. Thank you. Great question. Anyone else? Right there. Right here.
Has he checked in with AB?
All right, keep talking. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. So I won't comment on Bank of America or JP Morgan bringing value, but I will talk about a really good question is, can large centralized organizations, Fortune 2000, Fortune 1000s, remain relevant in a centralized way? Okay. No, I'm not going to talk specifically about banks. I'm not going to talk about banks. I do have an answer. Next question. Come on, we have time. Right back there. Mm-hmm. Sure, applications needing multiple blockchains. So a routine thing that I usually see is a application that has its own blockchain for their line of business, but then they might want to use Civic or they might want to use Stellar, and Stellar has their own blockchain. And so in that case, I was talking about using companies that have already built ecosystems for other dApps to use. So effectively, instead of rolling up your own privacy dApp or rolling up your own payment dApp, you could use things like Stellar and Monero, which have their own blockchains. The larger point I was making is an enterprise willing to support Ripple, Stellar, Monero, and all of them else? And sometimes the answer is no, and that's not good. What we want to see is enterprise stakeholders embracing the diversity of blockchain. Where we are looking at now is people saying, well, I really like Stellar, I really like this, but maybe I'll wait for my blockchain to adopt it. So maybe their blockchain could be Neo or Ethereum and have it built on there. And I'm not talking about tokens and smart contracts. I'm actually talking about when they have their own blockchains. Even though I believe Stellar has their token on ERC20, they have their own blockchain. So just something like that. Next question. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Right. So a lot of them that I've seen, and I think this is what's brilliant about the token versus individual coins, is I think we'll see large platforms like Ethereum making it so that one entity might have a single wallet address that could support several tokens. That has yet to be built out. But it's definitely something where large entities may not want to have all these wallet addresses for all these various currencies. For example, if I wanted to use AMC movie theaters and I wanted to pay for it, AMC movie theaters doesn't want to hold all these coins. But maybe they want to offer their own blockchain. Does it make sense for AMC or Starbucks to offer their own blockchain? Well, no, because you have these other great blockchains like Ethereum and Neo that could support a dApp on top of them. So it's definitely a challenge because you have to explain not only the difference between tokens and coins, tokens and coins, but then you have to also convince them to go for it. I'm getting kicked out. So guys, thank you so much. Thank you for everything.
Thank you, Dennis. All right, we have our next speaker here. Andrel, is that you? And I did want to mention, so we found out with the view bar, they don't reserve tables, but they do have space, but it will be crowded. So what we're going to do is anybody who wants to go to the view bar can meet in the lobby here at 6 o'clock because we'll be done around 5:20. And they can go up together as a group and try to find space. And if you can't, there's also a lobby bar so the group can go back to the lobby. All right.
Hey. Hello, can you guys hear me? Okay. How do I switch the slides? I need clicker.
Just push the green. Just push, no, I'm giving it to you. Just push the green button.
Okay. Hey everyone, I'm Andrei Zamovsky, founder of MBSafe. I've been in cryptocurrency since 2010. I hold the world's first university degree in cryptocurrency. I've launched first ever Bitcoin merchant service, a couple of crypto exchanges in 2011, 2012. I founded Holy Transaction, which is the first multi-currency wallet still alive. And then founded MBSafe, the first blockchain software company, the first company that started licensing blockchain software. And we've been launching white label cryptocurrencies like Tether and other clients for a couple of years. And at the end of the last year, we got picked up by the wave of the ICOs. We happened to be the only company on the market that had a software solution that typical ICO needed. So we got a little bit crazy demand last year and launched 30+ ICOs. Where we played mainly the role of smart contract engineers and like economy designers. And recently we have launched Order Book, which is a decentralized exchange. So because I've been in this industry for a while, I have a pretty good like historical perspective, and I feel like I understand where is it going. So I think that the main problem that blockchain solves that is not obvious to a lot of people is massive switch to digital signatures. Blockchain finally facilitates the switch to digital signatures. I think all the paperwork, every time you have to put your signature on some piece of paper, will eventually be migrated to the digital form and somehow like recorded in the blockchain or similar database. And it will accelerate a lot of processes by like several orders of magnitude. It will make every business work like much faster. Yeah, and it's also cheaper when we don't have to waste time on paper and pen materials, and the process goes much faster when you do it in digital form. So most of the things that are currently happening with the blockchain were possible with centralized databases. We didn't need blockchain for most of the processes or most of the startups that are being built on the blockchain. But blockchain contains a critical mass of interesting features that finally facilitates the switch. It also introduces a global transaction ledger. That makes it really a convenient place for financial markets. So it facilitates the globalization of the economy. This is like an approximation of how financial markets looked like before the blockchain. Normally, when a company had to raise money, they had to shop around with local investors in their city. This is one of the problems that I faced personally when I was trying to raise money for the cryptocurrency project in Ukraine in 2010, maybe 11. Nobody around understood what I was talking about. And a lot of companies facing this problem. So they are limited. The investors normally don't invest in a company that is located farther than 50 miles from them or something around that. Blockchain has changed this. It introduced the global market of all sorts of financial instruments that include equity, bonds, revenue share tokens, and a lot of other stuff. And it facilitated creation of global community of the investors that primarily resides at Bitcoin Talk, Reddit, and a lot of other social media. It globalized the fundraising market. Now, it doesn't matter where you are located. You can raise money from investors who understand your area of expertise or your market. It connected investors and companies globally. And it also introduced a couple of optimizations. By 1000x speed increase, I mean the settlement speed for securities. For most post-trade settlement networks, it takes around 3 days. For blockchain networks, it's a couple of seconds. It also makes a lot of processes much cheaper because of the cost reduction of the infrastructure. You no longer need so many layers. And by 100x market expansion, I mean that you are no longer limited to your local financial market. Okay, now the interesting part. Blockchain token is the first standard of financial instrument that is accepted and understood internationally. Before blockchain, if you tried to sell shares of your company that incorporated, let's say, somewhere in Brazil to someone from Europe or Russia, he couldn't read the language, the share certificate, because it's in Spanish and he speaks Russian or English. It was one of the major barriers that investors couldn't really understand the paperwork that they were offered to sign. And for some magical reasons that I won't dive too deep into, everyone believes in that blockchain token is like legit enough to invest. Like it became like a template for any kind of financial instrument that is understood by investors in all countries connected to the internet. And it's one of the reasons why it's exploding so much. And it started to get some legal recognition. What's on the screen is an extract from the certificate of incorporation of a company in Marshall Islands where government allowed them to have shares on the blockchain. The shares of this company exist only in digital form in public Ethereum blockchain in the smart contract. There is no paper shares or any like paperwork, any paper register of shares for this company. It became the first case of company with on-blockchain shares. This transaction was highly experimental and wasn't advertised too much. The next one, the next state who allowed companies to have on-blockchain shares is Delaware, surprisingly. They have extended their definition of good enough register of shares to the extent that it can include the public Ethereum or any public blockchain can be used. As long as you can satisfy reporting requirements, they no longer care about the database that you use. And Wyoming has done some interesting thing for utility tokens recently. So the point is to show, the point of this slide is of these 3 slides is to show that more and more financial instruments are migrating to the blockchain, and I believe that most of the financial instruments will be issued on some form of blockchain within next 5 to 10 years. It will become the only form of existence of equity in companies and other financial instruments. Blockchain is eating the financial markets. Now let's talk a little bit about exchanges. So the typical problem, so current cryptocurrency exchanges are still at like the very early stage of the development and regulation. Most of them have started as a website, like simple websites with Bitcoin node designed for actually end user on the back end. They don't have like enough layers of security, and the typical model for an exchange is that they have a pooled account where all the funds are stored, and they keep internal ledger of the balances, and this internal ledger is not really connected to the blockchain in any way. And somebody can mess up with this internal ledger, and they don't have to report it to anyone. And as a result, we saw Mt. Gox and a lot of similar cases. There is also, so decentralized exchange is an exchange where people hold the wallets, the accounts. They don't do deposits to the exchange. Instead, they trade via some sort of matching engine implemented on the blockchain. It can be a smart contract. It can be on a protocol level, like in BitShares or NXT or others. But the problem with the first generation of decentralized exchanges is that they have provided no means of authentication. Everything is completely anonymous, and regulators don't like it. It can't scale to the regulated financial markets because it lacks measures of identification and restrictions of certain jurisdictions. And we have invented the solution last year. It is actually possible to create a decentralized exchange that is still compliant. if you combine on blockchain KYC, if you write some data about the customers on the blockchain, more than just the address, and issue a special type of token, we call them CATs, compliance-aware token, that will take into account the data. So how it works? Exchange acts as an authentication provider. When user registers, it not just deploys the contract that represents user account, but also stores KYC data in obfuscated form. It contains only the country and the level of verification and the link to the verification provider, which is Exchange in this case, from whom you can request additional data. And it allows the token issuers to create tokens that take into account the jurisdiction of the address when they are deciding, when the algorithm decides whether the transfer is allowed or not. So it actually allows to enforce regulation using smart contract language. The token can decide whether it will go to a certain address or not based on the level of verification of that address. And it's possible it works today in public Ethereum network. We don't need any private blockchain for this. It's just a matter of creating more complex contracts. So, yeah. We have made a sample implementation of it. Here we see it's semi-centralized, so the KYC process is centralized. We store KYC data privately. We don't publish KYC data on the blockchain. The exchange contract, the matching engine, is a contract in public Ethereum blockchain that has certain compliance rules embedded in it. And each user owns a contract with the funds on this contract, so all transactions are happening peer-to-peer between users and this decentralized contract. But the exchange server is authorizing an accounts and writing some KYC data to the blockchain before users can transact. It allows to satisfy all the compliance requirements. At any time, the issuer of the token can generate a full list of the token holders with links to KYC provider, or maybe even a report with the names. And the privacy is still preserved because none of the private data is published to the blockchain. Each shareholder is KYC'd properly by the exchange, and it allows us to have like legal shares on the blockchain according to the Delaware's definition. We have made a reference implementation of this exchange. It works today. It's called Order Book. A little bit of advertising, but I think we deserve it. And I'm ready to answer any questions. Thank you. So the question is, how do you fund your wallet? When you register at this exchange, it deploys a smart contract for you. It's one more wallet for you. So it's a contract where you are the only one who has full control over it. So you just send, once your account is approved, you send money from one wallet to another. There are multiple ways to fund it. You can fund it with cryptocurrency or with fiat currency. We have also issued fiat currency in form of ERC20 tokens as a little side project. And you can actually fund it with dollars and trade dollars on a decentralized exchange. We have the custodian account for the dollars. For dollars, yes. So it's a hybrid. So for all Ethereum and ERC20 tokens, it's decentralized. For everything that doesn't exist or didn't exist in Ethereum before, it's a hybrid model where we have custody. Sorry, could you repeat it? Like in previous coins, what were the popular features? Mm-hmm. see. What's popular now are registries where the token represents the right to access or change some data in registry. For example, for real estate title registry, one of the projects that we helped to launch, Propi, the token is used as basically a license fee to use the registry. And there is a couple of IoT-related projects that we are working with where utility tokens represent a form of license to use the registry on the blockchain.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Sure. Could you speak a little louder, please? So order matching engine is a smart contract. Order matching engine is a smart contract. Yeah, it's pretty complex smart contract, and we have a scaling strategy, but I don't want to dive into details at the moment. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, everyone.
I'm sorry?
Okay, great. Well, thank you for staying to the end. Our last speaker is Keith Herman, founder of IPA Equities PMBC Group, talking about investing in cryptocurrencies. He's going to be 20 minutes, about 20 minutes?
Yeah, we'll see.
Okay, all right.
Is this on? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right,
okay.
around 20 to 30 minutes, and then we will be done. And at that point, you can go outside, and those who want can go up to the bar.
Okay. So to give you a brief intro to my companies and what I do is IPA Equities has been around since 1999, investing in different sectors over the years, and got into technology in 2000. Just to fast track, we have invested into over 20 blockchain technologies. And my other company, PMBC Group, we work with technology companies. I've worked with over 200 technology companies over the last 8 years and represent clients in blockchain and the crypto space. So I'm going to be speaking today on investing in cryptocurrency and an overview of blockchain and what it represents. And I thought it would be a good idea, first of all, to thank the organizers of this event. I speak at quite a few of them, and they really did a great job assembling a great team of people and panelists, as well as lining up ICOs. And for these types of events, I can tell you that they really did a tremendous job. So I'd just like to acknowledge them and maybe give them a round of applause. So just want to kind of get a lay of the land here. I know that people came from all different places and people are in different backgrounds. So just to get an idea, how many people here in the crowd are from the development community? If you could just raise your hand. Okay, do we have any miners here? Okay, do we have any professionals, accountants, lawyers? Investors. Okay, so we have quite a good mix of people here, and which is usually the case. So hopefully there's something here for everybody. How many people would say that they're new to the crypto space? How many people would say they have a pretty good moderate, let's say, understanding of blockchain and crypto? Okay, and then how many people would say they're experts? You're the guy. There's always one in the crowd, yeah. No, that's great. So yeah, again, you see a lot of diversity, and that's what we see more and more at all of these events, is you get a big cross-section of people. So the question that I have for you now is, why are you here? Perhaps maybe somebody just wants to volunteer and tell them what is it that brought them to this conference. Anybody? How about you, sir? Yeah, what is it that compelled you to come here today? Okay, great. You said, sir, you're a miner, correct? So, small scale. I'm sorry, and where are you in from? Florida. Okay, and so how are you finding it so far, the presentations? Very interesting, yeah. Yeah. Anybody else? How about one more person? How about you? You said you're an investor, correct? Okay, so you're interested in the ICO process and, no? Okay. Well, again, we see there's quite a good cross-section and different reasons why people are here. So what is it that we actually know about blockchain? Who is the founder of blockchain? I guess even that is debatable. There you go. And he's definitely in the top 5 for contention, so. Yes. Sure. Can you hear? No, you can't hear him. Okay, so essentially what he's talking about is blockchain is a distributed ledger system, and we're going to get into that. So what we know about blockchain is that in 2008, Satoshi Nakamoto supposedly invented this, whether it's a person, whether it's a group of people. In 2008 is supposedly when this occurred, and then within a year later, it was actually realized and implemented. What actually is the result of that is you have a distributed ledger system that's decentralized, and it's transparent, and it's open source. So what does that really mean in the bigger picture? Anybody want to take a guess? Okay. Now we're getting somewhere. I like this. So, yeah. So in the larger picture, why this came about is because of disenfranchisement with current systems of institutions and government. And the amount of control that they have been, exerted over the general population, the masses, the public, however you want to call it. And what the result of that is really, in other words, is it really restricted the amount of goods and services that were available to the mass population. And so this disenfranchisement led to the development of blockchain to be able to make things more accessible, allow things to be transparent, allow fees to come down, and really, benefit, the population on a much grander scale. Because in order to take part in the government system or to get access to most goods and services, you needed to be identifiable through some sort of government identification, and you had to pay high fees. And that excluded the vast majority of people. And so this evolution of blockchain is really, to get things into the people's hands, to alleviate a lot of things that exist now, from poverty to clean water that we don't have, but things on a much greater scale than what we're talking about, just speeding up transactions. And so, this is something that is much greater, is the point that I'm getting at, because it eliminates the government in certain respects. You don't necessarily need to have an identification to be part of it, government ID, and you can transact at a very small cost, and for people that are unbanked, that's critical. Yes, trust and decentralization of power. Right, because through the transparency, you can validate, and it's open source. So people can see it's all open, nothing's being hidden, people can contribute, and they're a part of it. And that leads me to the next thing, is what it does is it's really restoring power to the people. I mean, that's what this is really about. We can get, caught up in the technologies and the specifics of it all, and that's all great. But it's important to see the big picture and, understand that this is an ecosystem, this is a movement, this is something greater than a single technology. And so we need to continue to go down this path to restore the power to the people so that they can have access to goods, services, more people will participate in this process, and they'll be empowered and they'll be willing to be part of this ecosystem. Where people have felt excluded, they just wrote it off. This is an opportunity for people to feel empowered again and actually participate where everybody's helping each other. And so this really requires a change in thinking, a paradigm shift. I'm going to tell you a quick story. I was speaking about 6 months ago at Fordham Law School to 300 family offices on the topic of raising capital. And a woman said to me, I'm having problems raising capital in my area for industrials. And so I asked her, well, what are you doing? And she said, well, I'm calling this one and I'm calling that one, and I got a list and I've got this game plan. And I said to her, well, in terms of the people that you talk to who turn you down, have you asked them if they could refer you to somebody? And she said, well, no, why would I do that? And I said, well, why wouldn't you? And she goes, well, why would they want to give me away their contact? In our industry, nobody shares contacts. And I said to her, that's why there's no innovation in your field. Your field has been stagnant and it's not growing, and that's why you're all here. There's a concept called open source where people contribute and share, and until you get on that page, you're going to have a very long road. This is about participating and doing things together. And lo and behold, I spoke with her briefly after that conference. I gave her some advice in terms of asking questions. I told her, just ask. Ask competitors, ask everybody that you know, especially the people that turn you down, and especially people who are in that industry, and especially your competitors. If your competitors couldn't get the money from those people, they have nothing to lose by sharing that contact with you. And she called me within a week and she said, you know what, you're not even going to believe this. I'm already on the road to getting the money. She goes, it's just a completely different way of doing things that in our industry has been taboo. So, that goes to my point, is that, we need more of this cooperation in where we are located here, especially, San Francisco, Silicon Valley. I'm from Los Angeles. This is a lot more commonplace than in the rest of the world. But you're all here for a reason, and that reason is because you're interested in blockchain, you're interested in cryptocurrency, and you're interested in being part of a much greater ecosystem to really make a change for the better. And that's what's really, critical here. So what I want to move on to now is actually investing in cryptocurrency. So, how many people are really involved in cryptocurrency? Does anybody, okay? You want to? Okay, so here we have a plug for a product. That's the greatest wallet on the earth. That's fingerprint encrypted, you said? Okay. So my question is can anybody take a guess at how many, at the end of 2007, can anybody take a guess at how many, approximately how many wallets are in existence? No, wallets. Wallets. Who owns cryptocurrency here? Who owns, how many wallets do you have? How many wallets do you have? You have 2. What's that? Yes. Yeah, anything where money is sitting. Okay, we're getting close. He said 30 million. Anybody else want to take a guess? Okay. At the end of 2007, there's approximately 21 million wallets. Of those wallets, a good 2017. 2017. I stand corrected. If I said 2007, I meant 2017. So, 2017, 21 million wallets. The majority of those wallets belong to, when I say the majority, a good portion, I should say, not the majority, a very substantial portion of those wallets belong to miners. Now, as the gentleman, the young lady over here, she said, you had how many wallets? 4. Anybody else? How many do you have? 3. How many do you have? 4. 15. Anybody else? 12. Well, yeah, he's a miner. So, just to give you an idea, I just kind of asked this question generally as just out of curiosity to kind of get an idea of in general. And my experience is generally people have 4, roughly 4. I have substantially more. I'm not a miner, but I'm an anomaly in some other people. But let's say 4. So let's say there's 21 million wallets. Let's say half belong to miners. It's 10.5. Divide by 4, you have 2.5 million wallets. That's 2.5 million people that hold cryptocurrency. It's nothing. So, you have to realize that everybody sitting here, this is history. You are part of something that has unbelievable potential that very few people are participating in. So, aside from the wallet holders and people that are actually engaging in holding currency, how well known do you think cryptocurrency is? Well, I was kind of surprised, actually. I'll just tell you real quickly, on my way up to the conference, I stopped at a department store to get a scarf because I thought it was going to be cold up here. And a young gentleman in his early 20s said to me, "Can I help you?" I said, "Yeah, I'd like to get a scarf." He said, "Come with me, I'll help you." I said, "Look, I'm in a rush, just whatever it is, just, give me whatever you have." He says, "What are you in a rush for?" I said, "I'm going to a blockchain conference and I don't, I need to be late. I don't want to be late." So he said, "Well, what's blockchain?" So I kind of looked at him like, you're 20-something years old. I said, "Cryptocurrency, cryptocurrency?" He's like, "No." And so I said, "How about Bitcoin?" He goes, "Oh yeah, I heard of Bitcoin." He goes, "You think I should look into that?" So, yeah, so to my surprise, even young people, they may know what Bitcoin is, they may know what digital currency is, but the point is how many people are actually involved in this? And again, it's a very, very small portion of people. So, having gone through all of this, like how does all of this relate to investing? Well, blockchain and blockchain projects and cryptocurrency need mass adoption to succeed. Now, we can see from what I'm just telling you that there's not the level of participation to get the kind of mass adoption that we really need as of yet. That's why what we're seeing is, you know, to some degree overstated. That's why we're seeing corrections in terms of the values of these currencies because of overstatements and not intentional. And a lot of the market is inflated because not all of the currency is being traded or volumes are extremely low. So there are other factors that, you know, that are, weighing in on the market. So what this, in order for this to happen, we need this mass adoption. That's why I started my company, PMBC Group, years ago, was to help technology companies. And that's what we do, is we help companies through broad-based media exposure to validate their technology. And the reason being is because once you have credibility in your space from your peers, then it opens up opportunities and synergies with other businesses. It also gets you out there for potential investment, capital investment, and it also eliminates the need to have to, for consumers or users, to do a tremendous amount of research to find out what you're all about, because you're being validated by a credible source, and so that shortcuts the educational process for consumers and users. And so essentially what that does is it's really greasing the wheels for mass adoption. What I like to look at, and my primary rule in terms of investing, is if it's strictly about the profits, the project, if it's strictly about the project's profits, then don't invest in it. I have what I call a sniff test, and there's 4 things that I look at before I dive deep, because I'm being offered opportunities every single day. I have people calling me, asking me to help them get exposure for their companies. I deal with companies that are in their infancy to clients that are very well known. I represent Dash, which is a currency. I also represent UC Berkeley Blockchain and affiliate companies and a host of other blockchain companies. And I'm constantly being offered to invest in companies that are, like I said, on the drawing board, companies that are, you know, ICO, post-ICO, you know, different stages. So I see a lot of opportunities. But in order for me, I have a sniff test. And what that comes down to is 4 things. And the first thing is does the project promote and support autonomous ecosystems for the greater good? So in other words, if it's just about a project where they can just increase the speed of a transaction, then for me, that's not enough. There has to be some greater impact, and it has to actually help people beyond just creating an efficiency. The second is, does the project have the ability to improve the way people live on a daily basis? This is what this whole movement is about. If you want to invest in blockchain and you want to be a winner over the long term, not a speculator, then you need to have that long-term perspective, and you need to invest in things of substance. So this is how I develop my sniff test. The third is whether the founder is promoting his company or whether he's promoting a cause. And what I do is I like to just, you know, Google the founder and kind of see what it is that, you know, is their focus. What is it that's kind of their mission? What is it that's driving them? And if it's about the cause, then they're doing something out of purpose. And in my opinion, that's an element that you need to have a successful venture. The fourth thing is does mass adoption seem likely? Now, that may seem, like very difficult, but just kind of on a gut level, when you first hear about the project, do you get that feeling that it's reasonably likely that people are going to utilize this because it's got a good interface, it's easy to use, it's seamless? Can I see myself utilizing this all the time because it's something that makes my life better on a daily basis? Those are the 4 things that I look at. And then if I get past that, then I apply just kind of the standard investment analysis. And that's what everybody talked about, that everybody, goes down the list. So I'll just mention them, but you all probably know what they are by now. You want to evaluate the executive team. You want to see what their past experience and performance is. If anybody wants to write this down, I'll slow down, but I'm assuming that, yeah? Okay. Has the team worked together? And what is their focus? Because a lot of projects, there's a lot of things that they want to accomplish, but what is it that they're focused on doing first and foremost? The second thing is evaluating the technology and the development team. So what I look for is, does the technology fundamentally make sense? Because believe it or not, people will tell you about a technology and you're just like, that just makes no sense at all. It's just not practical, it's not realistic. It's just, it's just a thought, it's just an idea, but I don't see it coming to fruition. The other thing that goes with that is it scalable? And that's really important because you want to invest in something. These are things that are going to take time to develop, and you want to make sure that you're investing in something that can really grow, beyond selling, 1 million phones or, 1 million this or 1 million that. You want to be involved in something that can scale exponentially, that you can see the potential where it can just grow through synergies with other businesses. It has the ability to keep expanding. And then how likely is it that the team is actually going to execute on what it is that they're saying they're going to do? And again, you kind of look at the things that, have they worked together? What have they done? And then from there, the last thing that I look at is I evaluate financials. So I look at a lot of existing companies. So I actually get to look at actual statements, operating statements and balance sheets. But in the case where those don't exist, then you're looking at projections. And in a lot of cases, those projections are, not very reliable. Yeah, well, I mean, white papers are evolving. White papers were 10 pages. Now you're starting to see them, more extensively, but they were focused. Right. So what the gentleman is saying is in the white papers, you're not seeing financial statements, profit and loss statements or budgets or whatever. And in large part is because they're selling, a lot of cases, and I'm not taking away from any specific project, but in a lot of cases in this space, people are selling the dream. They're selling a dream. They don't have the team. They don't have, anything to really execute. I had somebody just a few days ago, I spoke at a conference. Gentleman came up to me. He was actually also a presenter at the conference. And he said to me, I want to do an ICO for microloans. And do you think that I'm going to have a problem with, it being a security? And I said, well, loans are, they're already regulated by, where you are, by the Department of Corporations, and where you are already regulates them, and you're already subject to reporting anyway. How do you think you're going to get away from reporting to the government when you already have to report to the state? So, everybody has an idea, but, it's up to you to do the due diligence. I would encourage you all to, consider, again, the big picture and what this is really all about. And everybody who's here is supporting this greater cause to help people on a much greater scale. And if we can keep that in mind without getting too sucked in by all the opportunities and, get rich quick and, technologies that are very limiting. If you can keep the focus on the bigger picture, then I believe you're all going to be winners in investing. And you have to be in it for the long term. You can't expect to be in for a year or 2 years. This is equivalent to essentially, and this time I'm going to get the year right, this is basically roughly equivalent to 1997. Based upon the amount of money that went into to the internet in 1995, that was equivalent to 2016. In 1996, in 2017, last year, significantly more went into blockchain than went into the internet in 96. And so if you look at the curve, blockchain is growing on a greater scale exponentially. And in my personal opinion, is going to continue to scale, provided that the people who are leading the technologies continue to stay on the path of what they originally set out to do, and I believe they will. So I'm gonna just, so that concludes my speech. I'm gonna take questions now or comments. Yeah, okay. I'm sorry? Okay, so the question, the comment basically is that it's hard to exclude large corporations such as Bank of America because they're so heavily invested and hold patents on blockchain. And this idea of trying to be transparent and decentralized may seem a little far-fetched at the moment. Would you say? Right. So again, the idea is he's talking about open ledgers being more transparent and being more accountable. The thing is, though, with institutions, is what they're really developing is more intra-blockchain, and a lot of that is proprietary and it's not open. And so they're just utilizing the portion of the technology that creates efficiencies for them to make more money, but it's not really helping the people who need the most help. And so that's why I'm saying, we can't be fooled by what it is that they're doing. We need to, be clear on what it is that their, efforts are. If they were the ones who were leading the charge, then we wouldn't be talking about Ether. We would be talking about, B of A coins or whatever. That's not the case. And so we need to support the people, like Ethereum and like EOS and these other blockchains that are trying to continue to promote, what's in everybody's best interest. It would be great if the banks would be transparent, but that's a little naive. We all went through 2008, nothing changed. They're still doing the same stuff, still doing subprime mortgage loans and all of that, still selling them in the secondary market, still have the rate, like Moody's and S&P rating securities and then selling them in secondary markets. It's all just another catastrophe in the making about to happen all over again. We can avoid that, and we can do that by everybody here continuing to be involved in this and to bring in more people and support the other people who are interested in doing this. Oh, if I may, If I may, one last thing. I'm going to be speaking tomorrow at Draper University for FinTech World. And if anybody's interested in going, you can go as my guest. It's about, I think, $400 or $500 to go. If you want to go and you're interested, you can be my guest and go for free. What's that?
They just show up?
Just come meet me, and you can just take a quick photo of this, and you can present it, and they'll allow you free admittance.
Here, why don't we, can we hold up so people can
Well,
see right now, or you want?
oh yeah, if you.
I mean, so that
if
if anyone who wants to, then they don't have to follow you around.
Okay, yeah.
Anyone who wants to, come take a photo of this. Draper University is in San Mateo. It's an entrepreneurial university.
Tim
Draper. And this
Draper.
is I don't know if it's their conference or another group is producing it, but it's an annual FinTech Expo conference tomorrow in San Mateo.
Yeah, and so I've spoken at several.
Oh, that's nice. All right.
They have an event in London.
See, aren't you better I did this than all these
yeah,
people
there
talking to you? Don't you people have anything better to do than go to FinTech events on your weekend?
And actually, several of the speakers, like Alex and a few other people who spoke here are also speaking at that event as well.
Well, it's endless supply. Now, I always say that we could do events at midnight on the weekend and people would show up. They probably would. All right, well, first of all, let's thank Keith, and let's give a round of applause for everybody who stayed to the very end. Thank you. So as I mentioned, we don't know if we get an actual table at the bar, but at 6 we're going to meet down here. We have about 40 people who showed interest in going up together, so we'll see if we can find space at the bar. If not, there is a second bar in the downstairs lobby of the hotel, and hopefully you'll all find each other.
We can just sit it.
Yeah, sure.
How about that?